privacy company committed to making privacy online simple. Used by tens of millions, they offer private search and tracker blocking with one download. DuckDuckGo. Privacy simplified.
Hey, Eastern Browdy, I am Marjorie Egan. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and every Friday from the Boston Public Library, and we are streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Hi.
Hi to you. And by the way, next Tuesday, a week from today, Mayor Wu will be joining us for Ask the Mayor right here at the library. So, Shirley Leung lives in Milton. The Globe's offices are in Boston. And in an act of amazing daring and environmental dedication, she recently biked to work. Here to describe her journey, Boston Globe business columnist Shirley, call me Lance Leung, joins us to discuss. Hi, Shirley. Nice to see you.
It did feel like I was preparing for the Tour de France.
Well, that's exactly my point.
It's true. I only was going at 8.5 miles puttering, but it was my Tour de France. And so how this all started was during the Orange Line shutdown.
Yeah.
Mayor Wu was advising commuters to seek alternative routes into the city. Mm-hmm. And one of them is biking. And so I was thinking and then there were caravans from, Forest Hills to downtown Boston, but then I was thinking I would have to bike from Milton to Forest Hills to downtown. I don't know if I could make it.
That's a problem.
And I'm terrified of biking in the open, kind of with other cars. And there are bike lanes in Milton, and which is nice. And then there's a beautiful Neponset, river trail, like a protected trail. But then, that's like the first 4 miles, and then the next 4 miles you're on the road with cars. And so I plodded, I hemmed and hawed, and I remember Jeff Mullen, who is the former state transportation secretary. He also lives in Milton, and I remember he's a partner at a law firm in town, Foley Hoag, and he said he bikes to work three days a week. So the light bulb went off. I said, I'm going to go with him.
Good move.
Very good idea.
Former state transportation secretary.
Exactly.
Right? He must know what he's doing.
So it was obviously a piece of cake if you went with the transportation secretary, right?
No, she said her life passed before her twice.
Well, okay, so get this. So I first told Jeff Mullen, I said, will you let me tag along? And he said, yes. And he said to me, but if you're not a biker, I said to him, would it be safe? And he said, if you're not a biker, I can't guarantee you it's going to be safe.
Well, that's a good introduction to the bike ride, I think.
And then
that would make me want to do it.
Right, and then I told my editor, I said, hey, I'm thinking about doing this column. I plotted it out. I'm going to go with the, I think I can be safe with the former Secretary of Transportation.
Sure.
And he says to me, that actually sounds very dangerous.
How far is it from Milton to the Globe?
It's only 8.5 miles. It takes Jeff 40 minutes because he's been doing it for so long. It took us about 50 minutes because I'm scared riding along cars.
So what was it like when you finally did get to the second half where you were riding along cars?
Well, I did see my life flash before my eyes.
Exactly.
When you get off the rail trail, Neponset River, and the parts of Dorchester. The roads are pretty wide, But then when you get to Morrissey Boulevard, if you're familiar with that stretch, it's treacherous.
You used to work on Morrissey Boulevard in our former... we did.
Yeah, we did. Right next door to the Globe.
You know that stretch. And you know how there's that cars zip off the 93...
Sure. Yes, they do.
So I have to get across that ramp to go to the sidewalk to continue. And that's hard because it's slightly uphill. And so you got to be fast. You got to make sure cars aren't coming down. And then along Morrissey was a bit treacherous, and then into, is it Kosciuszko Circle?
Yeah.
Kosciuszko.
Whatever it is.
The
Rotary.
Yeah, the Rotary.
Yeah.
And I just...
A nightmare.
And we went pretty early.
Terror ordeal.
We left at 7 in the morning, so it's not as busy if it were 8 in the morning. And so, but some of those cars get really, you can just feel the wind of the cars next to you,
I love that feeling. So what kind of reaction? I mean, there is as we know, every time we discuss cycling, there are the cycle wars of Massachusetts.
Yes.
I'm sure they exist in a lot of places. What kind of reaction did you get to your column? What kind of comments?
I didn't realize this, but there's like a whole biking constituency.
Oh, it's huge.
And a lot of them wrote into me, and they were also helping and saying, listen, there are people who are saying, I'm so glad that you're using your platform to kind of shine a light on biking. And they, for a lot of them, they're a little more brave than me, and they do it for years. And but they gave me some tips, like
wait a second. Why would they be glad you shone a light on it when you said you thought you were going to die on the way to work?
And you couldn't sleep the night before.
Well, because I didn't die. I didn't die. That's why they were so happy I didn't die. Imagine if I did die.
That'd be a problem.
It would be a problem for the cycling movement.
Right? By the way, we should say
not to mention you've got 2 young kids.
Right.
For frustrated listeners, when we're done with Shirley in a few minutes here, we have a bunch of things to discuss. We'll take your calls on Shirley's ride and what your experiences have been like with biking.
So I have to say, but one of the reasons why I also remember, Jeff biked to work is because he's often has said, this is the best part of my day, biking to work. And he was right, It was exhilarating. It was cathartic. Yes, it was harrowing. And I kept on thinking, can I do this again? What would be the conditions?
What's
for
the
me
answer?
Again? Well, I think an e-bike is one way.
Yeah.
Also, they need to fix Morrissey Boulevard.
Yeah.
They need to have better bike lane infrastructure. And the other thing, halfway through my ride, I realized even if I don't ever do this again, it's going to make me a better driver because I'm so mindful of sharing the road.
Shirley, one thing, Marjorie and I were talking this morning, we thought one thing stuck out about your column. You obviously ran out of space because you didn't have an opportunity to talk about your bike ride home. How was the bike ride home, Shirley Leung from the Boston Globe? How was that?
I really stressed out about this. I was thinking, like, how do I get home?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't want to wait the whole day.
Jeff wasn't okay.
Right, Jeff. And I was thinking, could I Uber? But then could I even find an Uber that would take a bike? And then I was thinking, maybe I'll take the Red Line home. But then I was thinking, do the elevators even work at some of the Red Line stations? Like, I couldn't carry the bike down the stairs.
You never know about the elevators.
So what did you do?
And so I said, I was very smart. I said, you know what? I'm going to take the commuter rail out of South Station.
There you go.
Because I can just roll it right onto the commuter rail. It was great. And then it was only like a mile back home. It was like 7-minute bike ride.
Why don't you just bike home from the Globe?
Oh no.
That wasn't.
But I think you touched on the big thing. We are going to talk about this with listeners.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people would bike if they weren't afraid of getting run over.
Right.
And I'm afraid of getting run over.
Right.
So
there's a very commonly, quoted stat about cyclists. Like they fall into 4 categories: the fearless, the kind of confident. But then the vast majority fall into the category of never. I will never, bike on the open road. And then, but like more than half are me, the bike curious.
Yes.
Like I see other people do it. I want to do it. I'm just scared to death.
Well, by the way, Wu is clearly on the right. Well, she's with us next Tuesday. It was on the right track. I don't mean that as a pun, even though it is. It's clear to me, cycle tracks, if that's what they call them, segregated, protected bike lanes, are the key. I mean,
there's another key.
Everybody would try doing this if they knew that they would be safe.
But there's another key.
What is it?
Showers. You have to have showers.
Yes.
How'd you deal with that?
I turned, I got downtown at 8. I turned around and went home. So I didn't even but Jeff Mullen I didn't get into. He has a shower at work. He keeps a whole closet of clothes at work.
You have to.
Yeah, so
they don't have showers at the Globe?
We do have showers, but I didn't want to bring my gear, and then I was like, I had to find a place to lock my bike, and I was like, this is too traumatic already.
Yeah. No, I think it was a great column because I think you hit that sweet spot of people that are bike curious but are afraid. And if there were more bike lanes, and Wu was talking about putting in more bike lanes, that would make a huge difference. I mean, we'll talk about it when we have the talk.
What's the name of the streets guy? I was
going to say Yasha Franklin.
I've heard great things about him.
Great.
What's his deal?
And so it's interesting because when you typically, he had a great quote in my column because he was like, you typically think of cyclists as wearing spandex, they're ready to go to the Tour de France. But when he sees cyclists in Boston, he primarily commutes by e-bike around town. He's like, they're just everyday people. They're parents, taking their toddler. They're not these, biking aficionados. They're just normal people trying to use their bike to get around.
Right.
And he provided a window, typically people of a certain generation, you think of biking as just for recreation, right? Beautiful bike, like the Esplanade, beautiful trails there. But the city of Boston wants to create bike trails or bike lanes as a mode of transportation.
Sure, of course.
Yeah.
And so that's the whole name of the game.
Don't you remember in college? I mean, everybody had a bike in college when I was at college, and you rode bikes all the time. But it seemed less treacherous, probably because you're 20 years old, and you just, you're fearless at 20. You're not so fearless when you're 30, 40, 50, and 60.
Can I make one correction about what you said? Marjorie knows this to be true. I mean, I don't bike as such, even though I'm
Well, you tried,
contemplating
Jim.
But I often wear spandex anyway, because I feel particularly comfortable in spandex.
I've never seen you in spandex
Well,
here.
Marjorie has.
I
had
spotted
really
Jim
good
at the hot
things to
park. He
say.
was not only wearing spandex, he was wearing yoga pants.
I was. We're talking to Shirley
Very
Leung. You should read
impressive.
her great column again. We're going to talk to you about it in a couple of minutes.
And so Jim had a great point this morning. We talk a lot about inflation really ruining people. Well, what about everyone shrinking 401ks, which means you'll have to work till you're 85 if things don't turn around. Larry Edelman had a great piece. It was kind of uplifting. Says this is his 5th bear market. We'll get through it. Will we?
Yes, we always do.
That's his argument, that we always do.
We always do. I mean, this always comes up. This story was ordered up. It's like, the stock market's down 25%. What should people do? And the advice is always
Nothing.
Exactly. Stay the course.
Nothing.
Don't panic. Stay the course. What goes up, what comes down will go up. And so, and that's basically the advice. Just you just hang on. Hang on to the money. And so you've just, I feel worse for the people who maybe they had money in the stock market and they had counted. They needed that for something to spend, like maybe in the next year.
Those are called retired people.
Well, no, but
those are called who are depending, in addition to their meager Social Security, on some percentage return from whatever the 401k that 50% of the population
may I just say,
has.
the fact that we have to depend on 401ks for our retirement is so outrageous that everybody's gotten rid of pensions. I mean, think about how
employers have gotten rid of pensions.
Yes, employers get rid. I mean, I'm so jealous of all my cousins that have these state and city pensions.
Yes.
They are golden until they keel over, and everybody else is in a panic. Am I going to make it through? I mean, I better die soon because I'm running out of money.
Right. And I did follow up. Remember last week we talked a little bit about the millionaire's tax and how much money. I think someone needs $4 to $5 million.
$4 to $5 million
for to last 30 years.
No, I mean, first of all, don't give financial advice. You do not. It depends on what your lifestyle was before.
Okay, how about if you retire?
Do you think that's true? I was thinking, is that a couple? Anyways,
there aren't many people that retire with $4 or $5 million available. No,
but how about if you slog it out to like 75, assuming that they won't fire you for being too old? How long? For 10 years? Can you get by with $1 million for 10 years?
I don't think so. I think you need at least 2 or 3.
No, you do not.
Oh my God.
Okay, what does your planner tell you?
I'm not telling you what my planner tells you. I'm just telling you.
It's not $4 million.
Okay, we're talking to Shirley.
I will investigate. I was
shocked. Can I just tell you, by the way, I'm just looking at the stock market today. I wake up this morning, NPR is doing all these stories. Are we in a recession? Are we not in a recession? Stock market's up 2.5%, 750 points today. No one understands. But the point I was trying to make, by the way, that Marjorie sort of touched on, is the amount of discussion that we have had. What are you doing? Exactly?
What is going on? I was like, is it me?
I'm sorry. I apologize.
Oh, your microphone got
I had the wire in the wrong place.
Okay, what I started to say was, why is it, you're the journalist, well, Marjorie is too, why is it that there is so much discussion about the impact of inflation, and there's almost nothing about the damage that's being done, particularly how are people votes going to be affected by the fact that they're worried that their 401k is disappearing. And I have to say, while Larry's column is reassuring in that it says history suggests it always comes back. It generally takes, by the way, a bear market is when it's a 20% drop from its peak. It always comes back. I think he said the average length of time through history is 365 days.
Right.
This one's been 273 days as of a few days ago.
I thought that was really interesting.
That is really, but there's no guarantee what the time frame is. But the point is, it seems to me that this may affect, we can ask John King this later, this may affect votes as much as inflation affects votes.
No, I
50% of the people have 401ks.
Yes, but how many people look at their 401ks? I don't look at it. I just know it's not.
It's too upsetting.
Right, it's too upsetting. But inflation, I think, is bigger because you see it every single day.
You think if you're
store.
Retired and depend upon this money, you're not checking your 401k pretty
well, but
regularly?
you don't need. But you don't need all the money right away, right? You get a certain percentage every year. So unless you're like at the very bottom, unless you're literally running out of money, yeah, you should worry. But
don't you remember in 2008? 2007, whatever you had was like cut in half.
Yes.
Yeah.
That was really...
But we've had a great run-up before.
Yeah.
So I think inflation is bigger than the 401k because I think people don't open up their statements.
Maybe you're right. It must be right. We're talking to Shirley Leung from the Boston Globe.
So you told me you're having the couple that was the victims of this
Steiners,
terrible scheme to harass this native couple. This is the weirdest story I've ever heard. This guy was this Jim Baugh. He was the former head of global security for eBay, kind of had a pretty good job. And he's now getting sentenced to 57 months in prison by federal judge Patty Saras for this horrible harassment, scary plot against this couple. So tell us.
Yeah, no, we've been writing about this for some time now. I think what's really, I think Judge said it was, didn't you say it was a cruel? It was a very, what they did was cruel conduct to this couple. And harass them. And I think what's really remarkable is that they're actually going to jail for it.
They're going to jail.
And
well, we should tell the backstory, by the way. This couple, for the last 20 plus years, has had an e-commerce website and newsletter. And it appears their great offense that upset the head of Wenig, I think his name was. He's since left with a $57 million golden parachute from eBay. What upset him was that apparently, which is a big deal, that they wrote one piece saying his salary was 152 times what the average worker's salary was, which is outrageous. But frankly, the average in this country of big CEOs is even more outrageous. And he then essentially assigns his security people to, and I use this term very intentionally, to terrorize these people. They fly out here, they start trailing them, they send them spiders and cockroaches or something. They trail them and track them around town. They leave scary things. They send them things, what to do when your spouse dies. I mean, it's really unbelievable.
Yeah, live spiders and a bloody pig mask. I mean, it's so crazy. You have to think to yourself, how did this guy have this big-time job? He was involved in this. I love what Patty Saras said. She said, it isn't just one thing. We all do stupid things which are aberrational at moments. But this was a pattern of cruel conduct. I don't understand it at all. So you wonder how they thought that they could get away with this for so long.
Yeah.
And how someone that could have such a good job could not think, I'm going to ruin my life.
Right. Well, can I tell you something? The place where you're making a big assumption that I don't know enough to disagree with you, but at least raise the question. You're making it sound like this is aberrational.
I don't know, maybe, right?
Well, that's
no idea.
You're right. They could have just gotten caught.
Is this how Silicon Valley deals with criticism
that is true.
that upsets them, and we just don't know about it? These people were so ham-handed, the security people, in terms of how they did it, and about a minute and a half, the Natick police were able to trace this.
Well, that's a good point. Late Steve Jobs was pretty cruel to his children. I mean,
but that's a different kind of thing, right? I mean,
I don't know. I think it's worse to be cruel to your kids than to be cruel to other people.
Well, I think it is worse, but I'm just saying the notion that you terrorize critics may not be as much of an outlier for eBay.
No, I think that's a really good point.
Know. But by the way, the Globe has done great reporting on this thing. And you know who the lawyer is representing the Steiners? She's on tonight with me, too. In the civil suit, Rosemary Scapiccio.
Oh, really?
I'll tell you, if you want somebody...
Are you serious? She's the lawyer?
And the reason you know Rosemary Scapiccio, in addition to everything else, she, of course, worked with Sean Ellis for years.
Trial 4.
Yeah.
It's on Netflix. If you haven't seen it, it is a really great story about police corruption and the woman that's responsible, really, for helping Sean Ellis. I mean, she did it. Yeah. But I tell you, if I was a defendant and I saw her come in the courtroom, I'd say, okay, I plead guilty right now.
Well, there's also in
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Trial 4 has, I can't think of his name, a fabulous television host who was involved in this too, by the way.
Yeah, his name's Jim Brown.
Oh, that'd be me. That's right. Thank you very much. So again, the Steiners, I think it's their first TV appearance, I'm not sure, with their lawyer tonight.
That's great.
At 7 o'clock on Greater Boston. Before you go, I really like this story about Charlie Baker's farewell tour, for lack of a better expression. The governor will be with us later this month. That'll be the last time he is with us. Well, not the last time he's with us. He'll be with us through his term, the end of December. But the last time until either Jeff Deal or Maura Healey as the
Yep.
governor-elect of Massachusetts. And the piece in the Globe, is it Matt Stout? who
Matt
wrote the piece?
Stout, yeah, and John Tomalky
Ex
took
of the Herald.
photos.
Ex of the Herald, of course,
Yeah.
we got to say that, says that most other prior governors have gone on international tours,
Right.
so that kind of thing. Baker's doing it a lot differently. Explain.
He has gone to little towns across and cities across Massachusetts. What was I don't know if it was in the lead, but it was one town they hadn't seen a governor in like almost 200 years.
Oh, it was
Yeah.
someplace out west, the western part of the state.
Western
yeah,
Mass, like the last time
I'll find it.
something terrible had happened there, like some kind of natural disaster.
And the governor at the time, 100 or so years ago, came and the disaster relief was $200 in cash
Right.
out of his own pocket
Pocket.
that he gave to the community. And the story ends with a great image where when Baker's speaking in this town, he takes $200 out of his pocket
Right.
and lays it down on the podium, trying to repeat history.
This was a great story because, Matt and John Tomalky, the photographer, followed Baker in his kind of goodbye tour, and at the smallest towns, and probably the biggest town was probably Springfield, right, at the Big E, and basically he's eating donut egg
Cheese
sandwiches,
curd. We talked to him about it last week,
loaded potato. Did you see
Yeah.
that photo of him at
great.
eyeing the loaded potato?
Yeah.
And he looked really excited about it.
Right. And here it is, eyeing the
That's great.
loaded potato.
That's a great
And
photo.
I said to myself, oh, I wish he would look at the MBTA like that. Whoa.
That's pretty good. You can see that photograph, by the way, if you go to youtube.com/GBH News. By the way, Tomalky's photographs, most people know him from the brilliant photographs he took a few feet away from here at the marathon finish line.
Yeah, no, anyways, it was
2013.
great. It was a great, and this, also the story showed you why Governor Baker is so popular, right? Despite the tea is struggling and other things have happened, but these are the things that make him, have power.
Okay. Before you go,
he's
let me-
not
sorry.
corrupt. We have had so much corruption in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and I think Baker's an honest guy.
Well, wait,
I think
how many governors? You're talking about House speakers. How many governors have been corrupt in recent history?
Well, that's true. We haven't had a lot of governors
No.
that have been corrupt, but
Well,
we've had a
that's
lot of Beacon Hill people that have been corrupt.
But I love that. He has no interest in national politics. He just wants
So he
to
says.
be the governor of Massachusetts.
Well, let me make a prediction before you go. When the governor was here the other day, not here, but in our studio, we mentioned the fact that he was not endorsed. The only race he was endorsing in was Anthony Amore, who's running against Diana DiZoglio for auditor. And we started talking about the governor's race. And I think I asked him something like, I don't really understand where you and Maura Healey you work together great. Why are you not just endorsing her? And I don't know if you remember, Marjorie, there was a long pause, at which point the governor said, I'll be here before the election. Why don't we talk about this next time? So here is my totally uninformed projection. He's going to endorse Maura Healey before the final.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, we have by the way, I have no inside information. However, in the last few years that he's been with us, I can't tell you how many times he's had good things to say about his working relationship with Healey. And I'll tell you, almost every time Attorney General Healey is with us, we give her a little bait to criticize the governor. She almost never takes it.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's purely because she wants to have Baker supporters. Obviously, that's part of it. But I think they have a really good working relationship and respect each other quite a bit.
There's definitely mutual respect there. And so, wow, that would be something.
Well, I have no idea. That would be something.
You
would it
just
not?
want that to happen so the
I want it to happen on our show.
On your
That's
show,
what I want it
right.
to
And
happen.
we want to happen so we can write about it.
By the way, if people, Shirley's going to leave in a second. If people want to take a photograph outside of Shirley on her bike, because you obviously biked here from the Globe, did you not?
That was only one morning only.
Fine. Okay.
I can't find the town that never had a governor there. I apologize.
That was in the
looking.
lead or
It
something.
was in the lead, yeah. First paragraph. Williams.
First or second verse.
Something or other. This is live radio, though, Marjorie.
Okay,
You know what I mean?
I'm sorry. I can't find it.
Okay, here's where we say, Shirley, nice to see you, and we will keep looking during the 1 minute break.
All right.
Shirley, it's great to see you.
Okay,
Thanks so much.
Shirley
having
Leung,
me.
thank you very much. And thank you for inspiring all these bicycle people
Listen,
that really want to
you're
do it
inspiring all those people.
and are afraid to do it. Shirley Leung
Not really.
is a business columnist for the Boston Globe. She joins us every week. Coming up, inspired by Shirley, we're opening the lines to hear from you. Has the recent Orange Line shut down and push from Boston to improve bikeability convince you to get out of the driver's seat and onto two wheels? How do you feel about biking to work? Stick around. listening to Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library.
October, our first full month of autumn. So it's time to show off your best leaf season outfits and enjoy every pumpkin flavor under the sun. I'm James Bennett II with The Drop, rounding up this month's best events around Boston. We've got a new edition of weekly bar trivia in Jamaica Plain, and a convention that will delight sneakerheads of all ages. Get the whole October list right now at gbhnews.org/The Drop.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you and the Worcester Art Museum, presenting Jewels of the Nile, where you can experience ancient Egypt in brilliant color through 300 pieces of jewelry displayed for the first time, now on view. More at worcesterart.org. And Jackson Walnut Park School, offering a Montessori early childhood program and an independent Catholic elementary school on their Newton campus. Open house Saturday, October 15th at 11:30. jwpschools.org.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. It may come as a surprise to some who have thought of biking to work in Boston, like Shirley Leung, but in 2020, the city was named one of the top 10 bikeable cities in the country, according to Redfin's bike score. That might say more about bike infrastructure in America than it does about us, but the city's bike infrastructure has only gotten better in the past couple of years. And as Marjorie said, newly appointed transit-oriented Mayor Michelle Wu has delivered on more bike lanes and better road infrastructure since the pandemic. One of the best things we can do to reduce our carbon footprint is leave the car at home, take public transit, walk, or bike. So we want to hear from you about your recent biking behavior in the city. Do you feel empowered or emboldened to take to the streets? If you did, how did it go? Or are you biking to work or just reserving the bike for leisure trips to see friends, run errands, or are you simply not biking at all? And if you're not, why? Give us a call or a text, 877-301-8970.
Would you bike to work?
I have to be perfectly honest. I would absolutely bike in any place that, as I said, has a cycle track, a segregated bike lane. But a la Shirley, we were making light of it. I am really nervous around cars where there's not a segregated cycle track.
Well, before they had the bike lanes on Beacon Street between Boston and Brookline, driving home was really scary for me as a driver because you were so close to the bikes and you were afraid that somebody was going to open the driver's side door and the bike would swerve and you'd hit them. And because I had so many close calls, as a driver, I'd be afraid. But people are doing it, and I would do it too if they were bike lanes. I guess I'm a chicken as well.
Well,
Zach?
but there's one other thing other than a bike lane is what Mayor Wu did. At least in the story I read in the Globe, when she biked to work was it a month ago or something? She went with a bunch of people. And obviously she's the mayor. But if you have friends or colleagues, just like Shirley did with the former transportation secretary, if you can go with an experienced cyclist or two, I think my nerves would be pretty calm. But the notion of going by yourself, if you're not used to traffic,
the story about
the
wife of the mayor of my hometown, she was with a big bike group, and this guy she could just go run over. She had multiple broken bones, arms, ribs. It was absolutely horrible. So it was a freak thing, but it happens. Anyway, Zach from Jamaica Plain, thanks for calling.
Hey, Zach, how are you?
Good. How are you doing?
Great.
Fine, thank you.
So, I wanted to call in to talk about just my wife and I both been biking to work for over 10 years, and we now have young kids, 1 and 3, and we bike with them every day. It's how we get them to school, it's how we get them to daycare, and it's how we get to work and do things on the weekends. And I'd say biking with our kids is 80 to 90% of how we get around Boston. And it's a good point, we bike everywhere, but we're kind of in a minority there, and the experiences, you see so much when you're on a bike. In a car, you have so many blind spots.
Yeah. That's true.
You do. I see people, the amount of texting on the road, the amount of people who are literally just they're not even looking at their windshield at all. They're just on their phones. You really see it when you're on a bike and how bad it is out there. So it's scary for sure.
Hey, Zach, do you take your kids anywhere where there's not a segregated bicycle lane?
We do, yeah. We do.
Doesn't make you nervous?
It absolutely does. We mostly do it with my wife, whoever's on the bike with the kids, and then there's the other person on their own bike. And, we have one person go out front, check the intersection.
Oh, okay.
You just have to learn how to ride defensively, and know the routes, know which streets are quieter, know which, you learn. No street is perfect, but you'll learn the ones that are more comfortable to bike on. And sometimes there's just gaps in the network. So you have a comfortable ride, and then there's like that 2 blocks that's really awful, and you just kind of get through it very carefully, and then you can pick up where the ride gets more comfortable again.
That was a great first call, Zach. We're glad you made it. Thanks so much for calling us, Zach, from JP. We appreciate it.
Judy St. Hilaire, the mayor's wife, a former Olympic runner, she was hit in a group in Mattapoisett with a whole group of cyclists.
Which mayor is she the wife of?
Paul Coogan.
Your buddy, your high school boyfriend.
Yeah, a truck reportedly pulled out in front of the group of cyclists. She was under the truck when the first responders arrived. So, this is not indicative of what happens to everybody, obviously, but it's scary. 16 broken ribs, punctured lungs.
Wow. Can I mention the whole thing about the driver? Jeff in Andover, I should have thought of this, he says a great tip for drivers is open your car door with your right hand. And you know why that is?
You turn around
because
and
it
look.
makes you turn your body, and you're more likely
point.
to see a cyclist before opening the car door. That's a really useful tip, Jeff. Thank you for making it. 877-301-8970. Adam in Cambridge, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hello.
Hi. Yeah. So I used to be a bike mechanic back in the 90s, and I just want to say it was a fun job, but it was really, really dangerous. And so I guess my only concern with all this infrastructure going on is that it might create some sort of false sense of security, false righteousness. And, people just need to really be cautious and be aware. How many people would take up ice hockey at the age of 40? It's really dangerous. So,
Well, Adam, you know what you'd do, though, a la Shirley? If you took up ice hockey at 40, you'd probably do it with somebody who actually knew what they were doing and had experience. And I think the key, if you're going to start doing this at 40 or 50 or 30, is you got to do it with somebody who knows what the hell they're doing, don't you think?
Yeah, well, that's with you.
Adam, we got to let you go, not because of the content of your call. You're breaking up almost every sentence. Thank you for your sharing your thoughts with us.
Steve from Watertown says there's a brand new bike trail from Fresh Pond in Cambridge to School Street and Arsenal Street in Watertown, which he says is great. That would be great if you're on a bike trail like that. And Shirley said the same thing as the guy from Foley Hoag said. It was the best part of their day, being out in nature and driving along, see the water and all that kind of stuff. Anyway, let's go to Rodrigo from Cambridge. Hi.
Hey, Rodrigo, what's up?
Hi. Thanks for taking my call. Just a couple of things I wanted to mention.
Sure.
As someone who's biked in Cambridge for around 10 years, I've definitely noticed the expansion of the bike network lately, which has been great. And two things I personally do that I think make me feel a lot safer. The last, 5 years, I purchased a little mirror that I have on my helmet. And that lets me be more aware of, when cars are coming up behind me.
Yeah.
And just being fully aware of my surroundings in that sense has completely changed the way I bike. Like, the few times I've biked without that mirror, I just feel much more exposed, essentially.
I have a quick question. When I used to run a lot, I used to run facing traffic so I could see the cars coming toward me. Why are bicyclists supposed to go with traffic instead of the other way? Because then you could see the people coming toward you. You know what I mean?
That's a really good point. That's a really good question. From my basic understanding of the law, it's essentially because bikes are treated more as cars than they are as pedestrians in the law. And that kind of takes me to my second point, which is that when you do have to not be when you're on a road that doesn't have a bike lane, Massachusetts law says that cars and bikes are equal, but yet many bikers will have the tendency to kind of try and go to the side. And since many of our streets around here in the city are pretty narrow, that actually ends up being more dangerous, as people have mentioned. Like, people open the door, you get doored, or alternatively, cars will try to pass you with very little space. So in that sense, I've actually found it's much safer to take the lane. And while some drivers will get frustrated, I found the majority of drivers are pretty understanding. And with the added benefit of my mirror, if I see that there's a car kind of waiting behind me, I can try and make my way to the side when I see that it's safe. And in that way, I think it kind of ends up being safer for everybody.
That's really a thoughtful call too, Rodrigo. Thank you for making it. And as we've discussed in Cambridge, while it's upsetting a lot of small business owners, they are proliferating. I mean, there is a lot of new bike space, safer bike space in Cambridge, big time, as we've discussed on the show.
Here's from a generally confident biker, but no question, I'm constantly worried about being taken out by a driver who's texting. And, somebody emailed that before, texted that before rather, and said, years ago you didn't have to worry about that. People were not texting while they're driving. And obviously a lot of us are now.
By the way, when you leave it, do you not see, it happens to be illegal. We were one of the last states to make it illegal. Is it fair to say everybody is texting? Literally, maybe there are a few of you out there who don't. I am stunned. By the way, I realize how dangerous it is, and I've pretty much stopped. And you know what's also,
What?
I actually do pull over to the side of the road if I really have to respond to something right away. And why don't people do that? Think about it. You take your eyes off the road for even a second or two, and you're a huge risk to yourself and others, no?
Yeah, no, it's really dangerous.
You still text and drive? Tell the truth.
Sometimes if I'm at a stoplight or a red light.
You're not even supposed to do it at a red light. I do it occasionally at a red light, too.
You're not. But I'm a guilty person, Jim. I'd feel bad if I ran somebody over when I was texting.
Well, you should feel bad.
I would feel very bad.
That's really big of you, by the way.
Absolutely. Brendan from Jamaica Plain, thank you for calling.
Hey, Brendan.
Hi, thanks for taking my call. I really appreciate it. First, too, I want to thank Shirley for writing her column.
Yeah.
I know you guys already said that, she's had a lot of people write in and thank her for using her platform for this, but it really is a big deal. And I think that the sort of perspective shift is really important that she touches on too. And honestly, I wish that everybody would just, you don't have to do it every day, but I'd love for everybody to get on a bike just once and commute into work just that one time. Take a great day for it, because it really will change everything you think about, how you get into work. And another thing that she touched on at the end of her column, which I'd love to see more people really acknowledge too, is I'm a war on cars guy. I'm not a fan of cars. I hate cars, frankly. I think they ruin cities. But I'm not fully on board with the whole ban cars thing. And what I really want to see is for people to just look at the trips that they take in their daily life and say, do I need a car for this? 50 to 60% of car trips are under 5 miles. Most people can do that on a bike. And I'd love to see people just replace car trips with bike trips where you can. I think that would make a huge difference.
Another great call.
Well, Brendan,
thanks.
it's interesting in Shirley's column, she said that she went to CVS or something like that was close to her house and decided, I'll just take the bike. It's
with
really
her
close.
Kid, didn't she say, with her older kid?
I'm not sure if she had the kid or not, but she was talking about that, and that's really true too. You see a lot of people taking short runs, but again, if you're on a busy street without bike lanes, you're in the same boat of having to be with the traffic.
And, getting back to Brendan saying everybody try it, has blue bikes changed the world? Virtually every city has a variation, but they really have changed the world.
Listen to this one. This is a good point. Can't bike to work because the wind and helmets ruin the hair. And that is
By the way,
an
speaking of
excellent
helmets,
point.
I don't want to get too deeply into this today. We'll do it another day. We've had this discussion before. The only thing that troubles me about blue bikes, and they say they've had virtually no accidents, maybe because they're fairly slow bikes, there are no helmets.
Right.
And you can bring your own helmet. But does that trouble you at all, or no?
Yeah, I hadn't thought about it, Jim, but it is a good point. Although I think people on blue bikes aren't going as fast as people on the other ones.
The bikes are slower.
Yeah, the bikes are a lot slower. Okay. We're talking about biking. What do you think about this? Off Shirley Leung's column about how she biked from Milton to the Boston Globe, which is down in the financial district. What do you think about biking to work? Are you doing it? Would you like to? Would you try it if it were safer? You're listening to 89.7 GBH Boston Public Radio. You can call us or text us at 877-301-8970.
Next time on The World, a debate in New Zealand over language in government documents. Some lawmakers want to replace bureaucratic jargon with plain writing that everyone can understand.
Clear information from government organisations is a basic democratic right.
Naysayers are blunt.
This bill is one of the stupidest bills to come before Parliament.
A plain-speaking debate in New Zealand on The World.
This afternoon at 3, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Comcast. Xfinity Internet is committed to bringing speeds over a gig to power your devices while fitting your needs and a range of budgets. Learn more at xfinity.com/gig. And Johnson & Wales University. From the Food Innovation Design Lab to the Center for Media Production and the Physician Assistant Anatomy Lab, Johnson & Wales dynamic lab spaces promote exploration and discovery. More at jwu.edu.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy, Marjorie Egan, live at the Boston Public Library, as we are every Tuesday and Friday, streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. If you're just tuning in, we're talking about Boston's bikeability off Shirley Leung's column about biking from her house in Milton to Boston, and whether you've been bitten by the bike bug or bitten by anyone else for that matter, and been motivated to get behind the handlebars. 877-301-8970.
Let's go to Jody in Canton. Jody, thank you for calling.
Hey, Jody.
Hi, love you guys.
Thanks.
Thank you.
So I used to live in Dorchester, and I was going to ride my bike to Castle Island one day, and I got hit by a car on my bike.
Oh, my goodness.
Oh.
Sent me to the hospital. It was pretty traumatic, and I am petrified. Unless it's in the path where there's no cars, I am so scared. I won't even let my son, we literally live around the corner from the school. He goes to Galvin Middle School. I will not let him ride his bike because cars drive it's a 20 miles an hour when you're picking up and dropping off kids. There are 3 schools there, and people get on my butt if I'm driving 20 and beep at me and fly past me. It's so scary. Cars drive like maniacs.
Jody, who was at fault in your accident?
It was the other driver. I was crossing. I stopped. I went to cross over, and she came around the corner and hit the side of me.
Wow.
Wow. Yeah, well, I don't blame Jody. I'd feel the same way. I mean, I think you're not going to get over something like that. And it is really, it's really scary. You see these little makeshift little memorials to people that have been run over a lot of times at intersections. There's a lot of talk. I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was really lucky. I didn't want to wear a helmet. I was in my 20s, and I thought it was too cool. And my mom said, Lance Armstrong wears a helmet. You wear a helmet. I wore my helmet, and the doctor at the hospital said that's what saved me from getting a
so glad you said that.
Dent in the helmet.
How are you? Are you fully recovered from this, Jody?
Oh yeah, I was a bartender at the time. I had no health insurance.
Oh Jesus!
So I was really banged up, tore a rotator cuff. I was bruised and stuff, but I'm fine. I'm totally fine. Thank God.
Jody, we're glad you're well, and we're glad you called. Thanks so much. 877-301-8970.
This is the other side of the aisle. This is from Ray in Newburyport. He says, you ever see me on a bike, you know I got a DUI. Because, of course, if you are arrested for driving under and you have to give up your license, then you might see yourself on a bicycle quite frequently.
There are no statistics about how much bike riding has gone up since the pandemic or since the Orange Line closure or since, would you not agree? I assume you'd agree that the concern about climate change is increased exponentially in the last couple of years. Don't you think that has a direct connection?
Yeah, I think climate change and a lot of people, especially young people, don't want to have cars because the cars are so expensive.
Here's dangerous.
Here's Christine in Watertown saying she wears front and rear blinking lights, even in the daytime for safety, which is probably a good idea. Oh, a couple of people from East Boston have texted to say you can't have bikes in the tunnels. And that's the only way to get to Boston. I didn't even think of that.
Well, it's not the only way to get to Boston, is it?
I think, how else did you get from here?
I don't know, but I don't think that's true.
You'd have to go all the way around. I'm not sure. I think it may be certainly the fastest way to get here.
Let's squeeze another one in.
Tim from Worcester, thanks for calling.
Hey, Tim.
Thank you so much for having me in this important topic.
Yep.
I want to say that when I was in my 50s, I used to bike from Worcester to Natick.
Wow.
If it was good weather. And basically what I would do is I would start out at 6:30 and bike on Route 9, and all the drunks are off the road at that point. So on a Saturday morning, so I would go over only 2 hills, major hills coming out of Worcester, and then everything was completely downhill. The problem was coming back up.
We're losing you. Hey, Tim, we got to let you go, too. Another bad connection, but thanks for sharing your story with us.
I should mention we're getting a lot of hostility here from drivers who don't like bikers. We always get that. Here's one that says, why aren't we talking about all the crazy bike riders that dart in and out of traffic, in and around cars, and cross intersections the wrong way? Bikers who think stop sign and traffic lights do not apply to them. I mean, there's a lot of hostility about...
Well, you know, one of the things that you remember, I've had this discussion with our transpo nerds, particularly our representative from the Great Livable Streets organization. I think one of the solutions to that is, you know, bikes on the road are supposed to be treated exactly like cars. And I made the point to her that it seems to me if they're violating traffic laws, they should get tickets too. We should discuss that with them next time they're back. I think leveling the playing field. There's danger on both sides, but I think you'd have to agree that texter, the danger from a car, a person driving a car, is about 3,000 times that which you see
people get annoyed
with an irresponsible cyclist.
If they have someone that goes through the red light, then they have to pass the bicyclist again, and then the bicyclist pass them again because they're stuck in traffic. They're going back and forth with the bicyclist.
We're out of time for this because luckily I don't have enough time to tell the story again about a cyclist who was in a demonstration blocking the roads in Harvard Square. We're out of time because we wanted to spend the last few minutes before the break. I'm assuming you saw in the Boston Globe.
We have 3 minutes to go.
That Jack Thomas.
The break, I think.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
We'll get back to Jack and my. Actually, we should do this now. Let's do this now.
We'll do it now.
Jack Thomas, who is not only a spectacular journalist, but a spectacular person, I assume you saw, died. And, you know, a lot of people became familiar not just with Jack's work through his incredible writing, my favorite story ever on the Romneys, which we'll talk about in a second, but about the brilliant piece he wrote in the Globe magazine about finding out that he was dying. I think it was last year, which became one of the most read stories of the year.
Yeah, well, the headline on that piece, and people can look it up, it was published in July of 2021. The headline was, I just learned I only have months to live. This is what I want to say. Actually, he made it a little bit more than that because it's now October. But he started at the beginning. So how do you live with the knowledge that your end is coming? How do you tell family and friends? Would I be depressed? Is there an afterlife? How do you get ready? He asked, does the intensity of a fatal illness clarify anything? And then he's got some humor in here. Well, he says, well, he looks at his wife's beautiful face. More admiring, that would be Jerry Dentelline, who's run a very successful PR firm. He talks about how he looks at the hydrangeas, and he has more appreciation of them and the roses. And he also is concerned about, in the final months, he points out, it'd be a lot easier if I'd be assured that after death, I get a chance to see people who've died already. But the problem with that is, he says, the afterlife is more complicated than what they say in the Bible. The experts say that more than 100 billion human beings have died. So if you're looking for someone to have a beer with, like Jasmine, Dave McKenna, or writer Jerry Murphy, or possibly Peter Falk, who played Columbo on TV, how are you going to find him in a mob of 100 billion people?
I know
it's a great piece.
It's a great piece. And I think Marjorie and I share the affection for one of his. He's written a million great pieces. The obituary mentions the terrific stuff he did around homeless people when he went out and lived on the streets himself.
For a week.
To see
and went to Deer Island Correctional Facility for a week with the cockroaches and the horrible food.
My favorite piece ever, and I think it's right up there with you. You wrote a column about this when you were at the Boston Herald.
I did.
It's about his piece on the Romneys, and it's only because it was a little bit different than what you read about Mitt and Ann Romney. And my favorite piece, and I'm going to paraphrase them, I get it way off, he was talking about how that Ann Romney was saying that when they were younger, it was a really difficult time for them financially,
right?
And they couldn't throw as many dinner parties because all they had to live off were stock dividends that were given to him by his father, who of course was the head of, what was he, the head of American Motors? I think it was,
remember? That's right.
And the governor, obviously, of Michigan.
George Romney ran for president, remember?
He did run for president, that's right.
He was a big deal. And, in this piece, and I'll give you the headline again so you can look it up, I just learned I only have months to live. This is what I want to say. He ends it by talking about, and he was a very funny guy.
Oh, really
very funny guy. The stories, you could tell you'd be absolutely on the floor listening to his stories. And he talked about how, as he thinks about dying, he says, I feel the same uncomfortable transition I experienced when I was a teenager at a camp in New Hampshire, packing up after the summer. I'm not sure what awaits me when I get home, but this has certainly been an exciting experience. And then he talks about his own life. I've had a loving family. I had a great job at the newspaper. I met fascinating people. I saw myriad worldwide leaders. It's been full of fun and laughter, a really good time. I just wish I could stay a little longer.
Could you write you're a pretty good writer and pretty funny and a great storyteller. Could you write a piece like that? You got the same news that he got?
I don't think I would have the courage to write it the way he did, and with the humor he had. So it's something you should clip out and save when the time comes. This will give you a little bit of solace.
Yeah, and check out his whole. His whole portfolio is brilliant. And by the way, the piece that you're referencing is online at the Globe's website today. It's not only his obituary, but the piece he wrote in the Globe magazine about his finding out that he was dying is there as well. So you should check it out. One of the greats, Jack Thomas.
Yeah, I'll give the headline one more time.
83.
I just learned I only have months to live. This is what I want to say. So he was a great journalist, local boy.
I know he was.
Yep,
Yeah,
still the newspaper and went to Northeastern and worked at the Globe, I think, from the time he was a very young man. Anyway,
What's coming up?
You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH. We are broadcasting live as we do every Tuesday and Friday from the Boston Public Library. We are streaming on YouTube.com/GBH News. Yes,
Can I
Jim.
say one more thing? If
Certainly.
you look at the text and the phone lines, the interest in the whole cycling to work and related things is immense. In the next week or two, we'll return to this and give you more of an opportunity to weigh in.
We need a bicycle built for two.
Yeah.
We can ride it here from Brighton every day. What do you think about that?
Do you remember my former producer at NECN, who's now a, whatever it's called, one of the 5 selectmen in Brookline, John Skoyak?
Correct.
He rode the Pan Mass Challenge on a bicycle built for two in a torrential rainstorm.
With his wife?
I believe all the way from, was it Wellesley to Provincetown?
I have no idea.
I believe they made it the whole way.
Okay. Well, I didn't say who's coming up next.
Who is?
Boston Foundation President Lee Pelton. He's going to be with us at the Boston Public Library. He's going to talk about the inequality you see in rescue help after a terrible hurricane like Ian. He's also going to talk about college costs. He used to be the president of Emerson College, so he knows what he's talking about. And now, of course, as I said, he's at the Boston Foundation, and he's the president there. Did I already say I'm listening to Boston Public Radio? Yes, we did.
No, you're not listening. You're on Boston.
I am on.
Radio.
That is right. I am on Boston Public Radio right here at the Boston Public Library. We'll be right back after the news break.
You're listening to Boston Public Radio with Jim Braude and Marjorie Egan. Just ahead, more smart conversation about what's going on in our community. That's right after an NPR news break, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you. And Legal Seafoods. October is Oyster Festival at Legal Seafoods, featuring a variety of new oyster dishes, including appetizers, sandwiches, entrees, and raw oysters. More information at legalseafoods.com.
Experience the history, beauty, and importance of Black culture and Black spaces on Making Black America Through the Grapevine, hosted by Henry Louis Gates Jr., tonight at 9 on GBH2.
I'm Jen White, host of 1A, and this is 89.7 WGBH, WGBH HD1 Boston, online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Ahead on Boston Public Radio, live from the Boston Public Library, it's Boston Foundation President Lee Pelton on how natural disasters exacerbate wealth inequity. Then, new details are emerging that show officials hesitated when it came to evacuating Florida residents ahead of Hurricane Ian. We'll get Juliette Kayyem's take on this intersection of national security and natural disaster.
The amount of drama surrounding the Harry Styles Florence Pugh movie Don't Worry Darling exploded last month, but the film itself was a lot less tantalizing, at least in the eyes of GBH's Jared Bowen. We'll talk with him about that, the gay rom-com bros, and other arts around town. Then, even more scandal, this time for GOP Senate candidates Herschel Walker in Georgia and Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. We'll talk with CNN's John King before opening the phone lines to hear your thoughts on why we love political hypocrites. All that ahead on Boston Public Radio 89.7 GBH.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. The U.S. Supreme Court is considering arguments out of Alabama involving the Voting Rights Act and congressional districts. NPR's Nina Totenberg says the act was enacted in 1965 to protect racial minorities from discrimination in voting.
At issue is Alabama's congressional redistricting plan adopted by the state legislature after the 2020 census. More than a quarter of the state's population is African American, but in only one district do minority voters have a realistic chance of electing the candidate of their choice. In January, a three-judge federal court that included two Trump appointees ruled unanimously that under the Voting Rights Act, Alabama should have created not just one, but two compact congressional districts with a majority or close to a majority of black voters. Now the Supreme Court will decide whether its precedents dictating that result should be modified or reversed. Nina Totenberg, NPR News, Washington.
Grammy-winning artist Loretta Lynn, known as much for her roots in life as the country songs she sang, has died. Her family says Lynn passed away peacefully in her sleep at home in Tennessee this morning at the age of 90. Jason Moon of member station WPLN looks back at Loretta Lynn's legacy, which includes dozens of top 10 country hits and a body of work that influenced generations of country music artists.
Loretta Lynn celebrated her Appalachian upbringing, but she didn't sugarcoat it. Coal Miner's Daughter brought Lynn a level of fame beyond music through a best-selling book and an award-winning film. Over the course of a career that spanned more than 50 years, she sang about standard country subjects like faithless husbands, but also veered into more controversial territory, attacking the social double standards applied to men and women and addressing birth control. Later in life, a collaboration with rocker Jack White would reignite interest in Loretta Lynn, bringing new appreciation to her role as a pioneer for women and a songwriter who gave voice to overlooked perspectives. For NPR News, I'm Jason Moon Wilkins in Nashville.
The U.S. could be facing a bad flu season. NPR's Rob Stein says infectious disease doctors are urging people to get their flu shots.
The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention and the National Foundation for Infectious Diseases say it's especially important for people to get their flu shots this year. That's because after virtually disappearing the last 2 years because of the pandemic, the flu looks like it could hit the U.S. early and hard this year. That's what happened in some countries during the Southern Hemisphere's winter this year, and what happened south of the equator often predicts what will happen in the U.S. At the same time, COVID-19 could surge again this fall and winter, which means a long-feared twindemic could strain the health system. So doctors are urging people to get both a flu shot and a new COVID-19 booster this month. Rob Stein, NPR News.
It's NPR.
Good afternoon. With the latest from the GBH Newsroom, I'm Henry Santoro in Brookline. A student at Boston's Jeremiah Burke School is in stable condition today after being shot on school grounds. Authorities say the teen was shot in the stomach by a fellow student this morning. Boston Mayor Michelle Wu says city staffers are on the scene.
We will not rest. We will do everything possible to pour into our young people to provide services and supports. Our neighborhood trauma teams are already on scene right now and partners from all across the city and the district.
The student accused of shooting their peer is in custody. No names have been released. A former Northeastern University employee who said he was injured when a storage case exploded in his office last month has been arrested in Texas. He'll be brought back to Massachusetts to face federal criminal charges related to the alleged hoax. According to the FBI and District Attorney's Office, 45-year-old Jason Duhame was arrested on federal charges of conveying false information and hoaxes related to an explosive device. He's also charged with making false and fictitious statements in the incident that took place in a Northeastern University lab on September 13th. No word yet on when he will appear in court. In sports, it's the Red Sox with 2 games left in the season, tonight and tomorrow, both against the playoff-bound Tampa Bay Rays. First pitch is tonight at 7:10. And in the forecast, mostly cloudy today, chance of rain this afternoon, windy as well as we deal with the remnants of Hurricane Ian. High only in the mid-50s. We are at 56 in Boston right now. This is GBH News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Duck
Radio 89.7 GBH. We are streaming on youtube.com/GBH News. Hello again, Jim.
Hello again, Marjorie. And just a reminder, next Tuesday, a week from today, we'll be joined by Mayor Wu for an hour of Ask the Mayor right here at the Boston Public Library. But first, we're joined now by Lee Pelton. Lee is the president of the Boston Foundation. He joins us monthly. Lee, it's very good. Oh, we're supposed to say, and in the spirit of full disclosure, he serves on the GBH Board of Trustees. Now I can say, hello, Lee.
Hello, how are you?
So, Lee Pelton, we were chatting before we went on the air about bicycle riding, and
Yes.
I found out that you are a big bicycle rider.
Yes, I am.
So, what's the deal? I mean,
Yeah.
do you worry about getting taken out by an 18-wheeler going around the corner?
Well, I road biking, although, during the last year and a half, I haven't ridden much, but I don't ride in Boston anymore.
You don't?
No,
Because of cars?
Yeah, because of cars. I've had 2 concussions in Boston, and that's enough.
On Wait,
from bike riding?
Yeah. So, and I had a helmet on in both cases, but.
How did they happen? How did that?
Well, one was in Harvard Square.
Yeah.
I was coming around Nini's Corner.
Yeah.
And there was a car in front of me. I was on the right. The car was on the left. I wasn't trying to pass, but he swerved to the right, and he hit my front wheel. And when that happens, that you're gone.
Well, that's good.
And so I flipped over, and somebody saw this and called an 911, and they were there in a hurry. Do you want stitches, Lee? No, I don't want stitches. I got to catch a plane in 6 hours. So
Oh, gosh.
let me go. So
let me just bleed all over the passenger next to me on the airline.
No, it was fine. I mean,
sure.
But
no problem.
I to this day I don't remember how I got home from that ride.
And what was the second concussion?
The second time it was my fault, actually, going across the Mass Bridge, and I wasn't on the street, I was on the walkway.
Yeah.
And there was a woman with a baby carriage, and she made a sudden left hand, moved across the bridge, and I couldn't get out of my clips soon enough. So I flipped over and I hit my head, part of my head hit the rail. And that was also.
Yeah, can you explain? We don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but explain to me, after the first incident, or maybe even after the second, you had no hesitation getting back on a bike?
No.
Why?
No, because I love bikes, and whenever I've had an accident, my first thought is, "Where's my bike? How's it doing?" I don't worry about myself.
Oh,
but I stopped. I am skittish about riding in Boston. I mean, I do sometimes, but I don't. I wouldn't ride to work or anything like that.
Well, that's a $64,000 question. I think a lot of us would ride to work if there were segregated bike lanes.
Yes, right.
I think that's the big thing, because I'm scared of that too. But if you were separated from the cars, then...
I think if I had 2 concussions, bike ride, I don't think I'd be biking anywhere. But in any case, we're talking to Lee Pelton.
What did you just say? I can't remember.
That's not funny. Cyclist extraordinaire from the Boston Foundation.
Do you want to tell Lee Pelton about trying to get out of your clips, Jim?
No, I don't. I really do not want to tell that story. I do not.
He couldn't get out in time either.
Yeah.
It was a sad situation.
A friend of mine, very quickly, lent me his $10,000 bike.
The big boy bike.
Because he said, once you do it, and it's a
Very
kind of
large.
titanium bike where you can literally lift it with one
Sure,
finger.
yeah.
I'm on the thing. He clips clips me in, I go, and what I forgot is when your feet are clipped in and you stop, you have to take your feet out of the pedals. I failed to do that.
Or you'll fall
and
over.
the beauty is, when I did fall over, it was at Fresh Pond, and I'm bleeding profusely from my leg.
God.
The extra beauty of it, there was some class that was there of little kids, and every one of them was laughing at me. So it was really overall a spectacular experience. Thanks for bringing it up, Marjorie.
You're welcome, Jim. Any opportunity, you know
you do.
Count on me.
Thank you.
So anyway, Lead Pelton, a bunch of very disturbing pieces have been written in the aftermath of Hurricane Ian and also in the aftermath of Hurricane Maria in Puerto Rico about the unequal recovery of people who who lose everything or most everything in a hurricane. What's that about?
Well, actually, it was self-reported by FEMA that their recovery dollars are unevenly distributed to folks of color, black families in particular. Those recovery dollars are less compared to the recovery dollars for white families and more affluent families. And you say, well, what's the big deal? Well, because that inequity creates an inequity in terms of equity for a family. Because a lot of these families that now have fewer resources for recovery will be in homes that are valued less, and so that their total wealth, net wealth, is less. There are other issues as well that disadvantaged families, or this won't surprise you, are less likely to have flood insurance, and so again that exacerbates an existing issue. The other is that if you're in an affluent family, your opportunities to move away from those flood zones inland, where you're safer, are greater because you have more wealth, you have more equity, and so on and so forth. And for other families, they tend to stay in those same areas and run the risk of enduring these kinds of floods.
With FEMA, I mean, there has to be some reason for this. They can't just say, oh, well, we're going to give white people the money and we're going to screw black people. I mean, there's got to be some sort of, what's their justification?
Well, there's no justification. It's just part of the kind of structural racism that's built into this country. And whether it's unbiased or biased, to be charitable, I would say it's probably unbiased, but still it's structural and systemic. I was impressed that FEMA was able to, expose their own bias, themselves and not.
I thought it was, and obviously I'm wrong. I thought it was the richer communities, which tend to be white communities, and a lot of the poor communities are often black communities or Hispanic communities. I thought it was that certain localities get more money, but you're talking about individual cases even.
Yeah. Well, it's on average, yeah. I mean, we're talking about areas, yeah,
okay.
Of course. Yeah.
And by the way, we should say this whole wealth and equity thing, and often the house you own is the most important thing you have. We should mention that you, in league with the Federal Reserve and a few other entities, are reworking that legendary study from 2015 and going far deeper, as we discussed with you, in terms of causes and that sort of thing. It seems to me, in terms of the FEMA thing, I did some backup reading on it. Part of it, which is not atypical, whether it's PPP loans or whatever it is, low-income people of color didn't do nearly as well because the process is not a streamlined process for a lot of people. Is there a place for what you do, philanthropy, in places like Puerto Rico, like southeastern Florida, to try to level that playing field by providing some assistance to people?
That's a great idea, and we'll give some consideration to that. I think one of the things that we could do, I think, would be to try to exert some pressure on making the process simpler and more streamlined, because it is apparently very onerous, and there are some folks who just don't want to take care of that process or don't understand the process fully.
By the way, Marjorie and I were talking the other day about how disturbed we were that there were so many reports about what happened in Southeast Florida that failed to mention climate change. But I'm trying to think, did we see one report, and you and I consumed a lot of it, one written or on television report that mentioned racial disparities? I can't think of one. Can
No,
you?
I didn't see racial disparities. And I also kept hearing over and over again, we're going to build back, we're going to build back, we're going to build back. And I'm thinking to myself, well, who's going to be able to build back? Because I didn't realize either that FEMA's not necessarily, they maybe get you a hotel to stay in, or they'll get you some minimal coverage, but if you don't have insurance and you don't have any money, you're not building back anything.
You're not building back anything. It's tough.
Yeah.
It's really tough.
And so this idea that people think they're going to, even if you do have insurance, your insurance is probably not going to cover all that.
Not at all adequate, yeah. No, not at all.
We're talking to Lee Pelton from the Boston Foundation. So before you left last month, we started talking about student loan forgiveness on the part of the president. And I think I can speak for all three of us. We all supported what the president did. I think the feeling was that a la Ayanna Pressley and Elizabeth Warren, maybe more would have been even better. But the place where we had to end, because time was up, was, I think, me saying to you, but the thing that the president failed to address at all was the issue of affordability. Yes, if you qualify, if you got a federal loan or you have a Pell Grant, you're going to get $10,000 or $20,000 of forgiveness. But if you're still in school or you're going to school starting tomorrow, he went out of his way to say it's a one-time program. You're not going to get it, and you're saddled with what at least we lay people, I'm speaking to the former president of Emerson, by the way, find to be borderline usurious tuition and fees. And I think you're about to defend those tuitions and fees. And luckily for you, we ran out of time. So here's your opportunity. Where am I wrong?
Well, I wasn't going to defend them, but I must say that the reporting on tuition, and actually the reporting on student loans is terrible.
What do you mean by that?
Well, so think of this, and again, this is not a defensive posture, but I think what hits the headlines are all of these students who have, by the way, we're too high and we need to do something about it.
Costs.
Okay. Our biggest issues are affordability and access. On the other hand, not on the other hand, but in addition to that, only about 10% of student loans are for $100,000 or more. And about 40% of student loans are somewhere between $10,000 and $20,000. 40%. We tend to talk about the $100,000, but we don't talk about the 10% or the $10,000 loans or the $20,000 loans. And it is the case that an investment in higher education in a college is worth it. You finish college, you're going to make $1 million more in your lifetime on average than the person who goes to high school, and that's a huge difference, and that's a big investment. The other thing that's not often reported is who are the people who are taking out these student loans, and I think the way it's reported, we have this notion that it's mostly 18 to 22-year-old young people, when it's not. 38% of borrowers are 40 years or older. Mm-hmm. Wow. And the average age, again, this is an average. There are a lot of different kinds of institutions, of course, but the average age of the student college population is nearing 30 years old. And so that gives you a different picture of who's borrowing money. It tends to be a lot of what we're looking at now are graduate school. We're also looking at folks who borrow money to go to these, technical schools and so on and so forth.
Well, also community colleges are an older population that's more working class too.
I'm not saying this in a defensive way, although it may sound that way, but those are the facts, and they need to be a part of this. And then what I was going to talk about last week was the difference between cost and price. Two different things. You and I we're going to go to Los Angeles on a United or something like that. We're sitting next to each other. You paid full fare. Somehow I got my ticket earlier, so I pay less than you do. We're still going to get to the same place. We're going to eat the same terrible food and so on. But my ticket is, let's say it's $25,000 less, it's 20% less than you. You paid $1,000, I paid $750. You have the same experience, but there's a discount. And so that discount in colleges and universities is really about the aid that colleges and universities give to students. 20 years ago, the discount was, actually more than 20, about 25 years ago, the discount rate for four-year private colleges and universities in this country was about 30%, which means that for every dollar a student gave the president of that college, on average, they got 30 cents back. And so the cost might have been, the price might have been, $1, but the cost was 70 cents. Today, that's 54%.
Wow.
So yes, right, because that's not sustainable. For every dollar, on average, for these four-year independent colleges, the president gives the student back 54 cents. That is not a recipe for economic survival. And then
for the university.
Yeah, for the university. And then I will say this one other thing. The states have turned their back on their college systems in a remarkable and awful.
We used to pay a lot more.
They're public universities, right?
Taxpayers.
Yeah. So
there's been huge cost shifting to the student and their family and away from the states.
That's exactly what's happened. So, take a place like University of Michigan or UCLA, state universities, they receive about 12% of their revenue from the state. That's all. And to what degree are they state, state universities?
It used to be really high. Didn't it used to be like over 50%, or am I wrong?
Well, it used to be. So in 1980, the share of the student aid revenue for a public university was 25%.
Okay.
Now it's 40%.
Okay.
Wait, can I say one thing here? You said repeatedly, I know this might sound defensive, but it's not. I think it is slightly defensive because you probably know much. I don't know if any of the statistics you're doing, I'm sure all of them are true, but you know far better than I, Lee Pelton, that when you read interviews with low and moderate income kids or adults who want to go to school and don't, overwhelmingly, why do they not have access? Because they can't afford the tuition. So the bottom line is the stats, again, I'm not quarreling with any of the stats, but the reality on the ground is the greatest barrier to access for that income category is the unaffordability and the intimidation of the unaffordability and the massive loans they'll come out with. So how does that
I would agree. I'm not, that's what I'm saying. I don't disagree with that. Affordability and access are the issues.
So what college is dealing with that?
Well, let me explain the business model if I can. Colleges and universities are in the people business. They provide a service, and there's a cost to the service. When you look at most colleges and universities, 60 to 75% of their expense budget is people who provide a service. And so it's faculty, there's staff, and so on and so forth. If you'd ask a college president today, what's the biggest issue? He says, I don't have enough, or she says, I don't have enough resources for mental health for my students, and things like that. So that is the issue. We're in a service industry, and if you change the funding of the service, if you change the service, then you change the college and university.
That's right.
And so maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe we ought to look to Europe as a model.
What are they doing?
Well, so many of those students, first of all, most of those colleges and universities are run by the state or the country, and many of those students live at home and go to their local place. If you're at NYU and you're an undergraduate there, the housing cost alone
astronomical.
is over $20,000 a year. And in Boston, it's around $18,000. That adds to the cost. And so if we're going to get anywhere in this country, we are going to have a massive restructuring of colleges and universities at the private level and the state level, but we have to live up to the fact that college and universities will look a lot different going forward than they do now.
Well, you know, they're looking a lot different. Every time I talk to a parent who just brought their kids to the college tour, a lot of them come back if they were been out of school for 20 or 30 years in a state of shock. Because in the olden days, you went to school, you had dinner at 6 o'clock, you liked it, you didn't like it. If you didn't like it, you had the vending machine or Dunkin' Donuts. Now we got the Indian food and the Chinese food, and the places are open till late at night. The gymnasiums look like the Olympic Village in half of these places. And as you mentioned, you're going to have the sexual assault, mental health issues, all these kind of things. I think when I went to college, which was a long time ago, but the idea was you were 18, you were a grown-up. Now, there's this in loco parentis kind of thing where the college is supposed to fix all your problems.
Well, it's also competition.
No, but actually we're less loco parentis now than when you were in college.
Oh, is that right?
Absolutely.
Oh, okay.
We treat more like students like adults rather than, our children.
Yeah.
That's a big shift.
But they're beautiful, a lot of the schools that were pretty dumpy.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Yeah, I don't have any comparison to make. I just know the business model it's a service industry. 65 to 70% of the expense budget is people, not all this fancy stuff about buildings and this and that. It's people, and the way you get at this is changing the service model.
Well, on that note, we don't have much time, but let me just say, we had this discussion with Charlie Baker about a year or so ago, which also made me really nervous. We were talking about online education, and this was his response to a similar discussion we were having with the governor at the time. And while he was extolling the virtues of that, to me, that's an introduction to second-class education. I can only speak for myself. The most important value, the greatest value I got out of college and law school was when I was sitting in a classroom, which was not that often. Right. But not only from the person in the front of the room, but from the social and intellectual whatever with other human beings. I assume you worry about that too, about two tiers of education. Those who can work from their computer at home because they have less money. I mean, those who will work from their computer at home get a second-class education, don't they?
Well,
they do.
It depends on the student. If you're an adult, remember the average age is not 20 or 21, it's somewhere closer to 30. And we have a lot of what we used to call adult learners. I don't know if that's kind of a demeaning phrase because they're all adults in a way. But they have different needs. So online is great for them because they don't need that sort of social interaction that you so prized, that was valuable to you. What they need is to learn some skills so they can go out and get a job or advance in whatever field that they're in.
Well, I'm not totally convinced, but I'm somewhere in the middle.
So I shouldn't complain about the Olympic villages and the Indian food until midnight. It's
no,
not
you
that.
you can't. Listen, it's a big issue, and we need to bring the cost down.
Yeah.
It's going to be difficult given the model that I mentioned, and now we find ourselves in what I called many years ago the death spiral of high tuition and high aid. And what's going to happen there will become a point where there'll be a reckoning. And where I thought it was, we're going to be soon, but it's going to be somewhere down the road. And we're going to have to change the model and the cost structure.
All right.
Because we can't go on.
We can't go on. We can't go on now, but we can go on next time we talk about it.
No, I'm not done with this. We're going to keep talking about
let me
this
just say one other thing.
What?
Einstein talked about the magic of compounded interest.
Yeah.
This is the flip side of that, because you're compounding. You pay that 70%, a 3% raise that compounds each year. That's what adds to the cost.
Yeah. Okay, we've been speaking with Boston Foundation
What did
President
Einstein
Lee
know anyway?
Pelton about. about the high cost of college and other
Good to see
things.
you,
And
lady.
thank you very much
Thank you.
For coming in. Coming up, our national security expert Juliette Kayyem joins us on the fallout and recovery from Hurricane Ian in Florida, and what to do about, I should say, the rise in political violence against lawmakers as we hurtle towards the midterm elections. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live.
From the GBH Newsroom.
I'm Tori Bedford. I'm the Dorchester reporter at GBH News. Local news is vital. When you have news told from a perspective of someone who understands the context of the area, who can incorporate the community perspective, then you're really getting the most authentic version of the story. As we see more of these local news resources disappear, we're losing that perspective, and we have to fight to retain that.
Part of your community. GBH 89.7.
Funding for our programs comes from you and the law firm of Davis Malm. Their employment lawyers have your work cut out for them. Learn more at davismalm.com. That's DAVISMALM.com. Davis Malm. Lean, agile, strategic. And Swan Galleries with African American art at auction Thursday, October 6th, featuring abstract works by Norman Lewis and Romare Bearden and contemporary work from Bisa Butler and Nora Purifoy. Information on Swan Galleries app or swangalleries.com.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We're live at the Boston Public Library. As we talked to you about yesterday, I think it was yesterday, over the past few years, political rhetoric has become harsher and harsher. I think you knew that. And it's starting to actualize itself into physical violence. Lawmakers are increasingly being stalked, threatened, attacked. Chilling quote we read to you yesterday from Senator Collins from Maine in a New York Times piece over the weekend. Quote, "I wouldn't be surprised if a senator or House member were killed." Joining us to discuss how to address this crisis, I'd say, is national security expert Juliette Kayyem. Juliette's former Assistant Secretary for Homeland Security under President Obama, faculty chair of the Homeland Security Program at Harvard's Kennedy School of Government. Her new book is The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. Hi, Juliette.
Hello to everyone. Hello, everyone.
Hello,
It's not just
Juliette
us.
Kayyem.
Hello.
Well, not being a big fan of Governor DeSantis down in Florida, I was pleased to learn that despite what he says about we told them, they just didn't leave, it turns out that they should have told these people in Fort Myers and these other barrier islands on Monday. They didn't tell them until Tuesday morning that they needed to evacuate. By then it was too late.
Yeah, it's a sort of inexplicable story, and we're going to figure out what actually happened. And as I've been saying, it's easy to second guess the decisions that people make in these moments. They're taking in information. They're weighing the risk of an evacuation, because evacuations are risky. But what happened in Lee County is inexplicable for a number of reasons. One is other counties around them were evacuating. Lee County is more exposed for the reasons that you said. So you would think, once you say, well, why are they making that calculation? The modeling, which had been unclear 10 days out, 5 days out, got super clear 3 days out. We kind of had a sense. It moved around a bit, but that's okay. I mean, you already knew that you were in the zone. And that gets to the third point, which is, we practice this stuff a lot, we being people who are in this world. And a lot of these plans have like these triggering moments. In other words, if X happens, Y must happen. So think about bridges, the Cape bridges. If the wind goes 80 miles per hour, I don't know what the number is, close down the bridge, right? You're not even thinking. So they have a plan that says if the storm surge is threatened at, I want to say 6 feet, which they clearly had, then you evacuate. And they ignored that. So part of this is just figuring out why were they second guessing the planning that had been practiced for so long, and therefore we don't know what the relative death count is there. But it was a very vulnerable area for the reasons that you said.
Yeah, no. What was scary is hearing reports of people that found out in the Tuesday morning they should evacuate. Then they're trying to evacuate, and the roads are all full of water by then, or there's tornado warnings and stuff like that.
Right, that's why it's just a judgment call. You don't want to make it wrong too many times because then people won't have confidence in the system. So I'm sympathetic to that. But the thing that just doesn't make sense to me is every jurisdiction around them has evacuated. You would think you would go, we better do it just in case, right? Because we don't want to be the last people standing. And you get no awards. I mean, in other words, everyone's going to remember that you didn't evacuate. No one's going to remember if you do evacuate because everyone else has evacuated.
But they're insisting that they didn't do anything wrong. The guy from the county is insisting, and so is DeSantis.
I don't understand it because the truth is
they goofed.
They goofed. This is a little bit like what we had with Abbott in Texas after Uvalde. Like, why are you more information is going to come out. You know it's going to make the jurisdiction look worse. And as a governor, don't you want to learn from it? Like, why did they make that decision? So I'm definitely still, I wouldn't condemn it. I would learn from it. What was their calculation in the moments that this storm is coming?
So, Juliette Kayyem, when your book came out, and Charlie Baker was doing the questioning of you on our show, one of the things you two discussed is politicians having the courage to tell the truth about disaster preparation, prevention, et cetera, because it costs a lot and it doesn't look like you're really doing anything, et cetera. One of the areas where that really comes to the fore is something Marjorie and I were talking about the other day in the wake of this, which was the rebuild versus relocate thing. It is really easy for a politician to say, we're going to help you rebuild at that location that's likely to get hit again and again and again. It is really hard to say. Remember we quoted that head of the Department of Environmental Protection in 2011 in Massachusetts. Good for him, saying, we can't rebuild there anymore. This is too dangerous. Climate change is a new reality.
And most of them are not going to be able to rebuild because it costs too much money, and they're not going to get insurance coverage.
Not going to get insurance.
So what happens, we know that Sanibel, for example, the bridge doesn't even work. So you can't even gather. One of the most beautiful places on the planet. What's the conventional wisdom about how leaders, and I use the term loosely, deal with constituents about the whole issue of rebuilding where you love to live versus you got to move in?
Rebuild or retreat.
Retreat, right.
So it's Jim is talking about a term known as managed retreat, which is you take the opportunity, I don't want to call it that, but you're basically looking at a blank slate now, except for the emotional appeal people have to building back where they were. In the past, our disaster management system and relief system would say, oh, you poor Marjorie lost your house on the Cape, here's the money, build it. And everyone would be happy, and then you'd come back in 3 years because that house was going to be damaged again. We can't do that anymore, and so, or one would hope that we don't do that anymore. So part of what's animating this notion of managed retreat, which has been tried which is being used in various places in the government, fire areas. Post-Sandy, there's areas in New York where you're essentially saying, here's the money, we're sorry what happened to you. You have to let go of the emotional appeal of building where you were, but we will pay you to build a much better place, 30, 40, 50 feet back.
And we will only pay you.
That's the question. We will only pay you is the right way to go, because you have to do carrots and sticks, which is in the absence of this money, you either can't rebuild and you're not going to be insurable. Look, the way flood insurance works now, and it's just crazy, is most of the private market has gotten out of it. Most of the private insurance market has gotten out of it. So in the evacuation zone alone, 80% of the people who had to be evacuated did not have private insurance. A public system has built up underneath of the National Flood Insurance Program. It's a stopgap. It's super expensive. Most people can't afford it, so that's why you get the uninsured or underinsured. So what you can say to people is, you know, community build here or build this way. You will have a public insurance market that's affordable, and you will get your disaster relief money. But let me tell you, I'm looking at these numbers. I said this last night. This is going to be, at best, if you just think about the economic impacts, the ability to have these communities don't have a tax base right now. It's going to be a $500 billion disaster. I'm looking at the swath of Florida. It's $500 billion disaster. The idea that we are going to throw $500 billion to make Florida the same is like, okay, just give me a lighter, right? And just count the days until the next hurricane. But no one's willing to say it because of the emotional appeal, because of that sense that we build back.
But again, to get back to this, from what I've read, unless you are loaded, you're not going to be able to build back because you're not going to have insurance. FEMA's not going to give you, they talk about passing more money in Congress, but it's not going to be enough.
No, it won't be enough, but okay, so this is like the complicated disaster relief system. So you will have a private market that comes in for the rich people who probably had insurance. You're going to have a public market that is the disaster relief money that will go to various communities to re-support rebuilding. And then you're going to have the third pool, which is going to be the special supplements that you're seeing already coming out. 15 or 17 billion has already been authorized. That's like a street, right? But a lot more will come down, and that's the money that you can put conditions on, and that's the
government money.
That's the government money you can put conditions on.
We're talking to Juliette Kayyem. Juliette, we talked yesterday.
I feel strongly about this, obviously, because of the devil never sleeps. Like, we know hurricanes are coming.
That's a great name for a book, by the way.
Thank
you.
you.
Should think about that.
How was that?
Political violence. We talked about it yesterday, and Marjorie was reading some incredible statistics. Cori Bush from Missouri, right? Yeah. Congresswoman from Missouri spent $400,000 out of her campaign funds to protect herself because of threats. Virtually every politician who has the courage to take an unpopular stand in this country, we've had on the show, we've talked to people, death threats, you know, all this kind of thing. What does one do about this? We know that when it happened to, I guess, off the guy outside the House of Associate Justice Kavanaugh, then all 9 members of the court got some level of protection. As we said yesterday, Rachel Rollins got death threats, and what a surprise she didn't get protection. I wonder what that's about. But from the Marshal Service, what do you do? It's not just members of Congress. It's election officials, local election officials. Judges, of course. We know what happened to that one judge whose husband and kid was killed at her front door. What do you do about this?
So, I mean, a couple of things. Obviously, we have to live in a protective state where we protect people who have public positions of which they may be unpopular. So it is true that Congress, Senate, judges, election officials, you know, and you may get mayors or others who get increased security because their homes are vulnerable. You know, all this stuff is online now. It's amazing. You think you might not be online. People in 5 minutes can find your cell phone. And I'm talking to someone who...
Well, your voting address, it doesn't matter who you are, is public information.
Exactly, right. So that's exactly right. So not on their level, but all of us sort of face, the threats at home, the mail, anyone who has a position that there's an apparatus that is focused on them. So a couple things that I think about. One is most of it is talk. So that is a good thing, that it's just the elevated talk.
It's not very comforting.
It's the nurturing from the top. But here's where I would like to address my comments to Senator Susan Collins, who has the nerve to say she expects a senator or a congressman to be killed and doesn't see how her failure and her party's failure to take this on and to shut up the Marjorie Taylor Greenes and the Donald Trumps and the everyone. They could have done it. They could do it now. Not a single one of them will admit that they heard Donald Trump essentially put a bullseye, and I'm no fan, of Mitch McConnell and his wife.
With his death wish
tweet. Marjorie Taylor Greene every single day is threatening someone. Trump uses the language of fighting. He is now full-on QAnon, in which they do view it as a battle. QAnon's political agenda is to take Democrats and lynch them publicly. This is not like, I don't need to like deconstruct what is going on here. I know exactly what is going on. So to the extent that you can lower the temperature, you're not going to stop all violence. You got to protect people. It's exactly people like Susan Collins who have spent years trying to ignore what the party's leader has done. And so I don't come on here to pick fights with the senator up the street, but when she said that, I was like,
okay,
do you
fine.
not see the nexus between what you're failing to do, creating this vacuum of acceptable political behavior?
Okay, so
which is
sane
violence.
people would agree with all that, but there's an interim step, even if we were to reach that point where there'd be condemnation of those who directly or indirectly encourage political violence, like Trump does quite overtly. What do? Do you assign? Should the federal government assign a full-time person to guard Congresswoman Bush? Should the state government of Georgia have a full-time person covering Raffensperger, the Secretary of State? I
think those particular individuals who are targeted directly, because a lot of them are named. It's not all of them, but a lot. If you're named, if your family is named, you are vulnerable.
Okay,
and
so let's go to a much lower
what,
level. Dylan Fernandez, who virtually no one ever heard of, has been in the news a lot. He's a state rep from the Cape. He was on television with me the other night because he ended up going to Martha's Vineyard in about a nanosecond and did wonderful work. He's a 32-year-old state rep. He said on my show that he'd gotten death threats.
Yep.
And as soon as he said it, to his credit, he said, I wish I hadn't said that, not for the reasons you think. I don't want to take away from what the real crisis is for the 48 individuals who were misled by DeSantis's woman, Perlow, whatever her name is. But he did get death threats. He's and I mean this in a warm way, a lowly state rep in Massachusetts. He doesn't know if those are real or just fake. Does he get security from the state?
Probably not, because there's going to be this sort of generic threats that are. I know this sounds horrible, right? You don't want to live. I mean, but this is what has been unleashed, is that this is acceptable discourse. And so I would recommend that he talk to police, that he have, sort of direct access to local police, that they have some situational awareness, some understanding of what's happening. Maybe they're going by his house a couple times just to give a presence of security. But the alternative is a vulnerability for people who we want them to keep fighting. Like, you don't want him to say it's not worth it. Drop the immigrants, on Martha's Vineyard. You want him to still be out there, but to have a level of comfort. I think the distinction in my mind, and the distinction in at least federal public safety minds, is if they find your home, right? Because you have to try a little bit harder. So a generic
not
tweet,
very hard, right?
No, but most of them won't.
Yeah.
So a generic thing, I hate Jim Browdy, he's a jerk, blah blah blah. Want him dead.
Based on the text, I'd have security 24/7.
Yeah, exactly. That's not going to be. But they say, Jim's daughters are living at this. I would begin when the distinction is your family, because it does mean that they're trying harder to terrorize you as compared to the generic tweet. But it's no solace. I get it.
Can I tell you the other problem with this, which we don't talk about at all, while we do discuss the security portion of this, it also, security, which is merited in lots of these cases, limits access of real people to elected leaders at a community meeting. Right. You go to Washington. I mean, I was a former lobbyist there. What lobbyists and real people do is they go up to Congress people and senators
who are walking down the street.
You can't do it if they've
anymore.
got two marshals standing around them. And reporters, of course.
Or even just the image of Gates around the Supreme Court.
Exactly right.
I mean, that's a great point. That is a sort of necessary but shocking.
But in fairness, as we pointed out yesterday, this is on both sides. It's more GOP people. A third of it is GOP people, but a quarter of it is Democrats. And there was that woman, the 80-year-old out in Michigan, that was passing out anti-abortion leaflets, and she was shot, and there were the Abbott volunteers that were assaulted. So it happens from both sides.
Can I just
say
one
pregnancy
thing?
Centers,
I'm not excusing any of it. There is a difference when the leader of a party.
That's true.
And I think you just have to say that every time. You can look at the numbers on the ground. President Biden is not doing this.
Well, except
Donald
that
Trump
some people, I don't agree with this. However, a lot of people who are much more fair-minded than Donald Trump thought that they considered Biden's use of the term semi-fascist was gratuitous and provocative. You didn't?
No.
Okay. We're talking to Juliette Kayyem.
No, he's trying to get the party that won't fix itself to see it has a violent wing. And once again, back to the Collins of the world, we can't fix that problem. We being Democrats cannot fix that problem for you.
Well, Mitch McConnell could have fixed the problem
could have
too, by
fixed
the
it
way,
in
with
January.
a vote in the Senate.
It is unbelievable. Those 4 days, how different our history would have been if the 4 days of unity against what Donald Trump did, 4 or 5 days, had lasted.
Yeah.
And can I just tell you,
would have been a totally
the
different
Republicans
country.
would have been happier too. Right? I mean, in other words, you wouldn't have had these Senate candidates who are, I won't get into it, but the Walkers of the world or the Oz's of the world. You wouldn't have this being given voice, and he would have been isolated in a way in which he couldn't have found a political base like he's finding
well,
now.
It's funny. When Obama was elected
found
president, the first night, remember the famous story about Mitch McConnell taking all these Republicans out for restaurants, and all we're going to do is
oppose him,
is screw him at every turn.
Yeah.
It is really too bad he didn't do the same thing after January 6th. Take a bunch of Republicans down a restaurant, say, that's it, but he didn't.
And
they all chickened out.
They could have done it. They could have said, DeSantis, you're our guy, right? They could have said, everything, whatever, right? But we're going to line everything around you.
Well, we should just be clear what we're saying here. If Mitch McConnell, who was very critical of Trump right after January 6th, as the leader of the Republicans, had voted to convict in the second impeachment trial, clearly other Republicans would have followed suit. And the reason, you may not know this, the reason why conviction mattered, not only because most of us think it was the right thing to do, is it would have barred Donald Trump from running for federal office again under the 14th Amendment, which obviously would have totally changed the equation.
It would have changed our interest in him. No, I only say DeSantis, but I mean, another thing they could have done in terms of the violence, because that's all I'm focused on. The party can do, the party can believe whatever it wants. It can be pro-Dobbs. It can, be whatever, anti-gay marriage. I mean, I don't like it, but I'm saying those are policy debates that don't have violence at the sort of as part of it. Another thing they could have done is they could have circled around these contested primaries to get these crazies off of the docket. Why they didn't?
Well, the other thing they could have done is not confirm justices who would say you can carry a gun, a weapon in any setting that you see fit.
So really quickly before you go, there was this pipeline into the Baltic Sea that was going to bring the natural gas, a pipeline from Russia to Germany. There was sabotage, explosions. Who did it?
Oh, who did it? So it is sabotage. I have no weight, so I can give my theory. Nord Stream Pipeline 1 was the first connecting Russia to Germany. There was a 2 that went offline, or they stopped construction on that after Russia invaded Ukraine. The pipeline 1 was essentially offline. It had oil in it, but was no longer pumping. That was part of Russia's sort of, we hate you, Europe, and Germany has had to figure out ways in which it can satisfy its energy needs, and that's why prices are so high there. So that's sort of the background. So if you ask me what scares me at night, I'm not going to say that because everyone's going to be like, well, what makes me think that Putin is not thinking rationally? And so there's these questions about nuclear and stuff like that. If he's not thinking rationally, it would be what I presume is self-sabotage of the pipeline.
Yeah.
Because he's not thinking about, okay, there's going to be a day in which I'm going to want the German market. That benefits Russia. Russia's getting hurt by not having the German market. So you can't really protect from self-sabotage. The company that owns the pipeline is essentially a Russian front. So who knows if they were given access or whatever else. But it's almost impossible to secure all this pipeline that is delivering oil and gas, and I think the only reason why it hasn't been attacked in the past is some form of mutually assured destruction. If they go after our pipelines, we're going after theirs.
Before you go, though, I heard you say that on National Public Radio the other morning, and I wanted to call in, but I couldn't. I don't understand.
Morning edition, I don't think has a call in.
Why would Putin do that? Why not just stop the flow? He has the unilateral power to just, if you don't want to send something to Europe, to Germany in particular, don't send it. Why does he need to destroy it?
Okay, so one answer is I can't answer that question. That's what makes me nervous, right? In other words, he's not thinking about 2023. The other is that he is accusing other parties, including us. And remember, the Russia supporters within the Republican Party, including Tucker Carlson, are suggesting that the United States did it. There's no proof of it, and it would be crazy for us to do it because we want Germany eventually to have that access. So, but it does make us more serious about our critical infrastructure protection, and we'll see that. But self-sabotage like that is almost impossible to stop.
Good to see you, Juliette.
Good to see you all.
National
So
security
great
expert
to be live.
Juliette Kayyem. When you're not seeing her here, you're seeing her on CNN. She's everywhere, Morning Edition, etc. I tell you, Juliette, you're a real hot ticket here. Juliette is former assistant of Homeland Security under President Barack Obama, the faculty chair of the Homeland Security program at Harvard University's School of Government, and her wonderfully titled new book, I love this, The Devil Never Sleeps, Learning to Live in an Age of Disasters. And since we're surrounded by disasters, it's very apropos for the moment. Okay, up next, some other drama that Don't Worry, Darling box office numbers to a moving exhibit at the New Bedford Whaling Museum. GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen is the rundown on arts events in and around Boston. He is next on 89.7 GBH, Boston Public Radio, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
Midwestern states are helping farmers tackle pandemic-related stress by teaching people who interact with farmers.
They often show the signs of distress to people who they work with regularly. They will tell people who are perceived to be on their side about what they're going through.
I'm Mary Louise Kelly. That story this afternoon on All Things Considered from NPR News.
Today at 4, here on GBH News 89.7.
Our programs are made possible thanks to you. And Gentle Giant Moving Company, official moving and storage provider for the Head of the Charles Regatta, employing rowers and athletes since 1980, and currently hiring to join their team. More at gentlegiant.com. And Tools of the Mind, the research and play-based curriculum offers pre-K and K teachers tools designed to help ensure children develop cognitive, social, emotional, and self-regulation skills. toolsofthemind.org.
Trusted. Local. News. This is 89.7 WGBH. WGBH HD1 Boston. Online at gbhnews.org. Boston's local NPR.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Marjorie Egan, Jim Browdy, live from the Boston Public Library and streaming at youtube.com/GBH News. Has there ever been a movie that's garnered more headlines and drama than Don't Worry, Darling around its theatrical release? We'll get into it all, but the top lines to get us started are, did Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine? Why did the movie cause Canadian psychologist and neo-fascist Jordan Peterson to cry? Fear not, we're bringing highbrow executive arts editor Jared Bowen down to the realm of mere mortals, that'd be me and Marjorie, who thrive on juicy Hollywood gossip, to explain it all. Jared, how are you?
You don't think I traffic in that myself?
Why not?
I know you
Who
do.
doesn't? Okay, to get us in the mood here, here's a little sound from the movie. This is Harry Styles, as we said, caught a lot of flack for his subpar acting in this clip that leaked ahead of Don't Worry, Darling premiere. Hear his performance for yourself.
If you keep talking like this, you're going to put it all at risk.
You're worried about a demotion? That's what you're worried about?
Our life. Alice, our life together. This. We could lose this.
Wow.
Well, he didn't sound that bad.
Sounded horrible.
Okay. So what's the story? What's the story with this movie?
Well, so the film is Don't Worry, Darling, and it is a story, you presume that it's set in the 1950s, and there are a group of men who have gathered to live in Victory, this idealized community, where every morning they put on their suits and ties, and they get into their 1950s cars, and they all pull out of their driveways in a cul-de-sac at the same time, and they all drive off into the desert to go work on the Victory Project. And as soon as the men folk have gone off to do the work of the day, the women do their work of the day, which is cleaning and putting on their aprons and doing the cooking, and this is how lives are separated, and it's all presided over by this man named Frank, played by Chris Pine, and he he's advocating for men to be strong and for society to be in this perfect way, kind of this idealized notion of what life and marriage in America should be. And so you have Alice, played by Florence Pugh, married to Jack, played by Harry Styles, and something starts to go awry in her brain, and she's having these weird flashbacks, and she's getting the sense that this isn't all as it's supposed to be. And then that's about how we spend 2/3 of this film, is just all of this happening, and there's not a lot of movement forward, which was my main criticism of the film. So you don't really understand what we're moving toward, why we're moving toward it. There is a big turn at the end, in which you kind of see coming.
Nobody cares about the movie. Let's talk about whether Chris Pine.
So did he spit on Chris Pine?
Did he spit? What is going on in this? I don't even know anything about the movie, but I do know about this backstory stuff. What is this about?
I think it's it's about generating publicity because everybody's talking about this film. It's also about Harry Styles, who is one of the most famous pop stars of the moment and turning to film. By the way, I didn't think that his performance was all that bad. In that clip, just hearing him, it was pretty bad, but seeing him, I thought he did remarkably well, especially up against Florence Pugh, who I think is one of the most remarkable young actors working today. And then they have the film festival where they all show up, except for Florence doesn't show up. Why doesn't she show up? Is she having a feud with Olivia Wilde, who is the director, who is also in a relationship with Harry Styles? And then as they're sitting together, did Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine or the other way around? And who knows?
By the way, we should spit on some of our regulars if we want to pump up the ratings. Here is this right-wing Canadian psychologist, Jordan Peterson. This is a real person. On with Piers Morgan, getting emotional while responding to the fact that Olivia Wilde said she's basing the villain in Don't Worry, Darling on him and explaining why he's seen as a hero to incels. Incels are involuntary celibate nuts. And here it is.
People have been after me for a long time because I've been speaking to disaffected young men. What a terrible thing to do that is. I thought the marginalized were supposed to have a voice. It's very difficult to understand how demoralized people are. And certainly many young men are in that category. And you get these casual insults, these incels. What does it mean? It's like, well, these men, they don't know how to make themselves attractive to women. All these men who are alienated, it's like they're lonesome and they don't know what to do. And everyone piles abuse on them.
So I don't really get that whole backstory either. Could you explain that to me?
Well, neither do I, other than to read about this guy and believe that, from what I understand, he's talking about men who basically hate women because they're not getting the attention that they think they should get, which of course plays into the whole notion of this film that men have certain roles and women have certain roles, and the roles of women are much less than those of men. And so for Olivia Wilde to say that she based this Chris Pine character, Frank, on him, and then to have him start crying about it after gaining a lot of attention for espousing these views. It's
as if there aren't
bizarre.
millions of young women who struggle to get dates with the people they want. I mean, shut up. People are
Did you answer the question about whether Harry Styles spit on Chris Pine or you didn't?
I wasn't there, and nobody who was there will tell me. So
let's move on.
Okay, here's this other movie, which apparently has 95% rating on Rotten Tomatoes. This Bros, what do they call these gay rom-com that nobody's going to see. But before we find out why no one's going to see it, where do we have the clip for this? Here it is. Here's some sound from the movie Bros. Just came out, got rave reviews. We hear the main character, Bobby, talking to his straight friends about a potential romantic interest.
I don't think I'm his type.
How do you know?
Because I know. He told me he likes country music and his favorite singer is Garth Brooks. What kind of gay man says his favorite singer is Garth Brooks? That scares me. Plus, I see the guys he likes. They all look exactly like him. They're all these, big, hot, straight-acting dudes. It's just not me.
Well, is he a top or bottom?
What does that have to do with anything?
Maybe you're both bottoms and that's the problem.
I'm not always the bottom, Edgar.
Bottom day! Ooh, bottom day!
Oh my God. Gay sex was more fun when straight people were uncomfortable with it.
Sounds pretty funny to me. No one's going to this movie.
So the backstory of this film, this is the first major studio film that's a gay rom-com in the vein of Sleepless in Seattle. You go back to Bringing Up Baby, if you want to go back to Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. It's also the first time that a gay man has written a story for a major studio film. So this is a few firsts. It's remarkable that we have to get to 2022 before we can have a gay rom-com in this country. So there was a lot of attention behind it. And it is a very funny film. You have Billy Eichner playing Bobby, who is this kind of grim, cynical podcast host who doesn't think, he settled into his singledom and doesn't think that he can find a man at this point. And then he spies Luke McFarlane, which many people recognize him from his many holiday Hallmark movies.
Oh, yes. The Garth Brooks fan.
Yes, he spies him across the room. He's shirtless, he's a jock. He doesn't think he would have any attraction to him. Then there's the meet cute moment, and this goes along in the rom-com tradition. You have the meet cute moment. You have the changing of the seasons and a montage with the Nat King Cole soundtrack. You have foursomes. Okay, so maybe there wasn't foursomes in Bringing Up Baby. Maybe that's a new revolution. So there was a lot of attention, a lot of excitement about this, that this was finally happening, and it was getting good reviews. I thought it was very funny. It's cute. Some of it was filmed right here in Provincetown, I believe, last summer, and then it tanked at the box office this past weekend.
Eichner either tweeted or said or something outright, it's all about homophobia. That's what it's about. Is it?
You look at this country today, and I wouldn't necessarily disagree. Do I know for sure? But are people still uncomfortable seeing gay men in love? Men in love? Probably.
Well, I looked up at her request.
Brokeback Mountain.
$178 million it made on a $14 million investment. Now, in fairness, it appears that a huge percentage of the $178 million, by the way, did we say this film only grossed $5 million in the first weekend, which is basically nothing. It appears that the bulk of the $178 million was either after it was nominated for Academy Awards or won some or something. So that raised its profile, which obviously Bros has not had. So do you have a theory on what distinguishes Brokeback Mountain that virtually everybody I know has seen versus Bros? And I don't know many people who have.
Well, what's the difference between Billy Eichner and Luke McFarlane versus Jake Gyllenhaal and Heath Ledger?
Well, that is
you have two straight men playing gay characters, which I have no problem with. An actor is an actor. I don't have a problem with it. People think that's sensational that I would say something like that. I don't have a problem with a straight actor playing a gay person. But maybe people are more comfortable knowing that you see two straight men acting.
That's a very good point, because I saw Brokeback Mountain, and Heath Ledger was so handsome, and he has a great voice. I mean, as I said to Jim, he could have been having sex with,
an elephant.
It wouldn't have mattered, because just to look at him moaning and groaning about, that was such a tragic movie. It was so good.
It was a horrific movie. Yeah, honestly, to see it come out at this time, I'm as cynical, I think, as Billy Eichner, and that there's a lot of hate in this country. It still exists. We see it manifest itself every single day, and why wouldn't it manifest itself in this way too?
Wouldn't you think a lot of women would want to go see this, though? I mean, so many women are such close friends with a lot of gay guys. Wouldn't they want to go see this?
Well, also, it's just, it's nice to see two people in love. It's nice to see two people happy. It's nice to see something that's funny.
Yeah.
And by the way, Deborah Messing has a hilarious cameo here, trying to get rid of her Grace image from Will and Grace. She's delightful.
Well,
so go see Bros.
We'll have to go this weekend and try to pick up the pace, Jim.
We're talking to Jared Bowen. Let's go to the ICA, where there's less controversy. Rose B. Simpson.
Yeah, this is a show called Rose B. Simpson Legacies, and it's of her work within the last 10 years. And the curator, Jeffrey Dubois, has done a fantastic job of assembling these major ceramic sculptures that she's done in one room. So you'll find about 14 of them in a very dramatically lit room, and they all are standing at attention so that when you walk in, you have an engagement with these figures. And she comes from...
They're life-size, right? They look like in the photographs, or they're not?
Just slightly less.
Okay.
Yeah, I guess if you're a child, they're life-size. But certainly that's significant because you can look into these figures and they have these eyes. And I asked her about them when I interviewed her recently, and she considers her sculptures beings, and inhabited in them is a spirit. Now, this is her ceramic and sculpting tradition comes throughout her family. She grew up in the Pueblo in New Mexico, and she's telling stories of her own family, her ancestry, what has happened to Native Americans, and how as she terms it, we're living in this post-apocalyptic world when you look at what happened to the Native American and indigenous population. And so often in her work, you'll find that they are rooted in trauma. But as you work your way up the figures, she wants to find more optimism. So she represents things like the missing and disappeared women of indigenous populations, the children who were carted off to boarding schools and had their culture erased from them. But you see at the top of these figures, the sort of hope is often springing out, or symbols of hope. By the way, you can see these markings she creates in terms of symbols about protection and direction, moving forward. You can literally see her fingerprints because she is sculpting from clay, again, something coming from the land that she's manifesting. Also, she's just super cool because when she's not doing ceramic sculpture, she lives in the lowrider capital of the world, so she's working on cars and she's working on motorcycles. She's just unbelievably skilled.
You're fairly friendly with the woman who runs the ICA, aren't you?
Well, I know Jill Medvedow quite well, yeah.
So Marjorie raised this the other day. We are obsessed with the flooding these days in the seaport. And David Abel told us from the Globe he's making a film about the seaport and the building.
I heard some of that, yeah.
Called the inundation zone.
Yeah, right. So are they worried about their future? I mean, they are really right on the water for those few that have not been to the ICA.
I haven't heard that they're worried. I'm trying to remember, because I know a lot of the buildings down there have been built so that the mechanical infrastructure is at the top of the building, so it's less susceptible. And actually, now that I think about it, the design is such that the art is always shown in galleries. I believe it starts on the 3rd floor. And
oh, really?
So everything is high up anyway. I run down there a lot, and there are the natural breakers, and David Abel probably talked to some degree. Ultimately, it's not going to stop everything, but I think the building was constructed knowing that they're right on the water, that even when it was opened, 10, maybe even 15 years ago now, that this was a problem that the city was confronting in terms of climate change.
As long as it's still there, that beautiful place outside that is right on the water in the back of the ICA.
What did you say, as long as it's still there?
Well, I mean, you do worry, right now, but 50 years, 100 years, I don't know.
You walk through there, and as I say, I run through there all the time, and all of these new buildings are still coming up, and they're so close to the water. We always talk about that major storm a few years ago where you saw the flooding of the Blue Line, which is, a half mile away. So this is an area that is so susceptible, and yet this is our newest neighborhood in the city. It's almost incomprehensible.
Well, that's the whole point of the innovation district, the inundation district. I mean, I think that's the point of his film. He's pointing out that it seems a little reckless the way we kind of built that place.
By the way, the film is not out yet, so we're
it's not.
Just relating what David Abel told us.
But tell us about William Shattuck from Dartmouth and his paintings.
Yeah, they're on view at the Whaling Museum in New Bedford right now, and he is somebody who has lived in the Massachusetts South Coast for a long time and knows this land. And if you've been down to the area of Dartmouth and South Dartmouth, Westport, there's a very particular light that's there. There's a very particular scope to the nature. It's a very beautiful space. And so basically what he does and has done for decades is walk this land, roam it, know it. He'll make sketches sometimes and then go back into his studio and render these landscapes that aren't necessarily of a particular place, but they come from his memories. And I found them really, really enchanting. The show is called Reveries, which of course are dreams, and they are sort of a sense of a dream landscape. I mean, some of them are cloaked in this velvety darkness that seems, it's funny because I think people have very different interpretations. Some people will think that they're ominous. I found it to be like an enchanted wood or something. There are these renditions of sunsets that he does that remind me of when you spend a summer in the best day possible, and then you're rewarded at the end of the day with this glorious sunset. Some of them are really small, some are really big. As Naomi Slip, the curator, explained to me, her interpretation was that you can almost tip into them, so you have this experience. He said one of the most profound things to me. He's taught students for a number of years, and he would often ask his students, when you're painting, what's the temperature on your skin in that painting? So he wants students, isn't that great? Marjorie's smiling. And I love that notion because it makes you think, what if I'm there? What do I feel? Can I inhale that mist right now, that fog? And how cold is it around me, or warm is it? Can I hear other sounds in the forest? And I think he evokes all of those feelings in these really enchanting landscapes.
Am I just imagining this? But have you talked to us a lot more about what's going on at the Whaling Museum in New Bedford of late? And if you have, does that mean it's changed, or you're just paying more attention to it?
there's something coming together. There's the art museum there, there's DATMA there, there's the Whaling Museum. This is a community that has banded together with the support of local government to make the arts front and center. And we see this time and time again, that communities come together recognizing the value of arts as an economic engine, whether it's creating studio space for artists or rental space for artists, especially when you have a great landscape like the same one where Herman Melville walked and then went on to create Moby Dick. It still inspires people decades later. They have a poet laureate there. This community knows what it's doing, so it's got me coming back more and more.
It's good to hear. It's beautiful downtown these days there.
They've done a gorgeous job, no question about it. So tell us about Be the Change.
Be the Change is a public art exhibition that you'll find right now, right around the restaurants of one of our favorite people, Tiffany Faison, in the Fenway. But this is on view until October 26th, and it's really the notion, it's a collaborative notion, but Karen Tabb is really the mind behind it. And it references the tzedakah box, which in Jewish tradition would be used to collect change, but it's also based on the Hebrew root word for justice. So in talking with others, there was this notion of a box where you would put your spare change, and she decided to elevate that. Well, what if you could take something out of the box? What if you could make change? And so she's gathered 6 artists. She's one of them. 3 of them are Jewish, 3 are not. And they came together and they had conversations about what change would mean in terms of artivism. That's mixing art and activism together. And so each of the artists created a different sculpture that represented themes of injustice, like transgender rights, mental health issues, domestic violence against women, environmental justice. And within their works, you'll find embedded QR codes that will take you to organizations, nonprofits dealing with each of these issues, but they all tell very individual stories. Jason Talbot is one of the artists. He's from Artists for Humanity, and he has created a family tree, but on that tree you'll find handcuffs. And he's looking at gun violence and police reform, and what happens when a wrongful arrest happens in a family, how it ricochets and how it affects the rest of the family. In Karen Tabb's piece, she's created a sarcophagus with a heart on top of it, with Elie Wiesel's number that was tattooed on his skin from his surviving, ultimately, the Holocaust, and different remembrances around the sarcophagus. It's got a light that emanates from within. Tran Vu, a Dorchester artist, is looking at mental health, and she's created a geodesic dome with flowers and then all of these great quotes that are embedded all around it. So you have different experiences with each one, and as I say, it takes you beyond the art so that you can launch into how you can be more aware, how you can contribute, how you can change by following your way to these nonprofit organizations.
And where's it? I know you said it's near Tiffany and the.
It's Van Ness and Kilmarnock, I think, is where you should put your GPS or ride over if you have your bike helmet.
You know, to seize on something, since you make recommendations, can I make one? We had Ken Burns and Lynn Novick on a couple of weeks ago, right before U.S. and the Holocaust was released, this 3-part documentary about U.S.'s involvement or non-involvement in the Holocaust. And I did an interview with him last night for TV that's going to air next week. And I rewatched about 2 hours of this. It is, if there is required viewing, this should be right. It is so powerful and blows away so many misconceptions. He admitted even he and she misunderstood so much about what the U.S.
Our rejection
exactly,
of
and what the
Jews
the American
Germany.
people knew and didn't know when they rejected these refugees.
And all this
really
thing
brilliant.
about blowing up the train lines to Auschwitz, blowing up the train lines. We had people over here that we sent back, and the State Department wouldn't make it easier for people to get here.
It's really amazing.
It really is an indictment of, and you can't help but think about it in terms of what we're doing now.
Well, Tom Doherty wrote a book a few years ago, too. I can't remember the name of it, but looking at how Hollywood turned its back at that time, too. I don't know if Ken Burns deals with that in the documentary. I haven't watched it yet, but it's pretty shameful.
Yeah, he does.
In any case, what are you doing? What day is this?
Tuesday.
What are you doing? You have any idea what you're doing Friday?
Yeah. Well, we've talked about how the Obama portraits are here in Boston, and so we went over to the MFA to get people's first blush reactions to seeing the Obama portraits in person. And as you can imagine, for a lot of people, it's a very emotional experience to see it up close. And then we'll look at an interview that I did with Gregory Maguire, the author of Wicked. He and I are actually doing a talk to kick off the Concord Festival of Authors next week.
Neat.
So we're re-looking at that conversation as he's gone back into the wicked world in his latest book.
How long are the Obama portraits here? Do you know?
They are here until the end of the month.
End of the month. How hard is it to get in? My understanding, their time slots.
You do have to get a time ticket.
But you can get in.
You can. Yeah.
You can. It's great. Yeah.
Jared, thank you very much.
See you, Jared.
We were speaking with GBH Executive Arts Editor Jared Bowen. He joins us every week. Thank you very much, Jared. And his show is Open Studio. It is on every Friday night at 8:30 here on GBH2.
Thank you.
Up next, CNN's John King. We're going to talk to him about some really kind of crazy stories involving, I should say, the banner would be hypocrisy. I guess that would be it, Jim, that we're going to discuss.
I'd say that's an appropriate
John
word.
King. You're listening to Boston Public Radio, 89.7 GBH, broadcasting live from the Boston Public Library and streaming on youtube.com/GBH News.
You depend on GBH Radio to bring you quality, fact-based journalism day in and day out. And GBH depends on you, too. So the best way to support your listening is by becoming a GBH sustainer. And your membership stays active as long as you like. So you can rest easy knowing that you're always doing your part to keep GBH Radio running strong. Learn more at gbh.org/sustainer.
Support for our programs comes from you. And Vantage Healthcare, providing primary care physicians throughout New England. Vantage brings their primary care team on site to assisted living communities, nursing homes, and more. Learn more at myvantagehcs.com. And the DeMoore McKim School of Business at Northeastern University, where students can prepare to meet the changing demands of the digital economy by solving real business challenges. northeastern.edu/future of business.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browdy and Marjorie Egan. We are joined now by CNN's chief national correspondent, John King. He's also the host of Inside Politics, weekdays at noon. Hello there, John King.
Hello. Happy busy Tuesday.
Hello, John King. Well, a lot of us have been focused on the tight race down in Georgia between Herschel Walker and Raphael Warnock, the Reverend down there. I'm not sure where the polls are now. You can tell us. But Herschel Walker is facing a lot of criticism now, I think, because he's a big no abortion, no excuses, no life of the mother, no nothing. Then we find out with a lot of pretty corroborating evidence that he paid for a girlfriend's abortion, and his son is out there trashing his father for the violence he committed against the son's mother, of course, Herschel Walker's ex-wife. So do people... Is this going to hurt him? I hope. I don't know.
I think it's a great question. I don't do the hope part. That you can do that. I can't. My job is to watch the races. But that certainly, I think it's an important question. You're right that as a candidate, his position is that he supports a ban on abortion, no exceptions, not for rape, not for incest, not for the life of the mother. So how do you square that with what some would say is hypocrisy of this report in the Daily Beast? And you mentioned the documentation. There's a signed get well card.
Yep.
That's clearly his signature. And the Daily Beast says they also were provided a copy of a check that has his signature from his personal bank account, a $700 check, and that they were provided a receipt from the clinic for $575. Herschel Walker says this is a lie. He says that he went on Fox News last night on Hannity and said it was a lie, that it's a fabrication, that it never happened. And it's important to be fair to him and say that's his piece of this. I think the question, Marjorie, is what happens going forward. We count votes 5 weeks from tonight. All of the polling there has shown, all the polling I have seen has shown Senator Warnock ahead, but not by a lot. And Republicans do believe, in part because the Republican incumbent governor there is leading in the polls, and because there have been in the last 72, maybe 100 hours or so, a lot of evidence that Republicans are stabilizing, if not actually gaining a little bit in a number of races across the country that are important. There was some hope for Republicans that Brian Kemp, the governor, and if the Walker campaign could have 5 good weeks, they have a debate coming up in closing, that he had a shot there in a race that the Republicans really would help their math quite a bit. Now what happens? So there's this damning allegation. Walker right now is at a meeting with Christian conservatives in Georgia, a critical voting bloc for him. One question would be, would some of them say, no, I can't do this. I can't vote for this guy now. Ralph Reed, who's part of that group, just came out and told the reporters that he stands by Walker in this. And I think, to me, potentially the most damning thing is the son you mentioned,
Yes,
Marjorie.
the son.
22 years old, who says that he says that his father promised them at the beginning of the campaign he was going to be honest about his past, and he was going to essentially, say, I've been a sinner, I have a rough past, I've moved past that. And the son now says this story about the alleged abortion payment convinced him it was time to speak out. To me, to have it come from your 22-year-old son saying that Herschel Walker abandoned his son, abandoned that man's young man now, I was going to call him the boy, but he's a young man now, abandoned his mother. To me, that's as damaging, if not even potentially more damaging.
Well, the son also said that their father threatened to kill us, meaning his mother, and he held a gun to the mother's head, according to these domestic violence reports, and that they had to move 6 times in 6 months, running away from their father's violence. So if you don't believe the woman, and tragically lots of people don't believe women, even with pretty corroborating strong evidence, you think that they would believe his own son.
Yes, and again, the Walker campaign, some of this came up during the primaries, some of this came up in the past, and their hope was that voters had processed this, and some voters had decided, okay, maybe I'm uncomfortable with this, but I can't vote for the Democrat. The Walker campaign just thought, to put it more bluntly, that hopefully this was in the rearview mirror to them. The voters had made their decision, and now you're going to close in the final 5 weeks, try to make it about inflation, try to make it about Joe Biden, try to make it about anything else. Having the Sun come out 5 weeks beforehand with very dramatic on camera, videos posted on social media. And the Sun, it's important to note, is a conservative influencer on social media. This is not a kid who rebelled from his conservative dad, who is part of some liberal, group. And in those videos, he actually has some tough words for liberals who he said have been, trying to dig up dirt on his dad, saying he doesn't trust them either. And so I think, part of it is I'm uncomfortable as a parent. You're just uncomfortable talking about this. You're getting in the middle of some family trauma. But the Sun's point is Herschel Walker should have known that. Should have known that when he decided to run for office, to either be honest about it up front and deal with it. And the Sun says that the story in the Daily Beast yesterday was just a breaking point, and he decided he needed to speak out. So this is not over. Republicans, we're 5 weeks out. Republicans have no choice now. They either abandon him or they stand by him. That's their only choice. They can't get a new candidate. And so they are standing by him at the moment in their words and in their statements from the big organizations. The thing I would watch is when we're having this conversation next Tuesday, 4 weeks out, and the Tuesday after that, 3 weeks out, does money still continue to flow into the Walker campaign? Is he still on television advertising in a robust way? Or do Republicans say, you know what, let's take that money and move it to New Hampshire, or move it to Pennsylvania, or move it to Nevada, or move it to Arizona?
Speaking of money, Marjorie mentioned the $700 check that he allegedly wrote this woman. Andy Borowitz, who was with us last week, has a headline, "Trump furious at Herschel Walker, quote, only a loser pays his bills," which I think sort of says it all. John, the whole expression you or Marjorie used a minute ago about do the voters believe it, I don't think that's the question anymore. Even if they do believe it, do they give a damn about it? And while it's not uniquely Republican thing, we were both talking about, a decade ago when Senator Blumenthal, a Democrat from Connecticut, ran, he was the Attorney General, I believe then, of Connecticut, talked about his service in Vietnam. And of course, we later learned he never served in Vietnam, but obviously there's much more of it now. And I guess, you're somebody who follows this. It seems to me, at least I said, we're going to talk to listeners about this in a few minutes, that hypocrisy and lying is irrelevant to most voters. If your guy or woman, your candidate, is locked into positions on the issues that matter to you, you don't care if he held a gun to his girlfriend's head, or if he abandoned his kid, or if he lied about abortions. I mean, that's not a ridiculous statement, is it? Or am I overdoing it?
No, it's not ridiculous. It's hard for me. I don't have the data in front of me on that particular race. On that particular race to see how, again, in a close race, it doesn't take much.
That's
right.
True.
If a small percentage of Christian conservatives in Georgia say, I can't do it, I just can't vote for this guy based on this. If a small percentage of suburban moderates who were going to hold their nose and vote for Walker because they're mad about inflation or they're mad about some vote Senator Warnock has cast during his brief time in Washington, maybe they say, you know what, I can't do this. It doesn't take much, right, to move a very competitive race. I do think you're right on the point that I was just up in Pennsylvania a week or so ago, and you find voters there. You find some who say Donald Trump can do no wrong. It's all lies. Joe Biden cheated. Joe Biden stole the election. You do find people who say that despite all the evidence to the contrary. But you also find some who say, of course he did some of this stuff, or who say, yes, he did try to hold power after the election was certified for Joe Biden, and he shouldn't have done that, who then go on to say, but all politicians do stuff. They use more colorful words. And so some of them say they're still open to voting for Trump because all of them are corrupt. I just have to put my guy's corruptness or my gal's corruptness into context. It's fascinating listening to those conversations, but some people are so disillusioned with all politicians that that's how they rationalize it, or that's how they process it. I can't even say rationalize because I'm making a judgment that that's what they're doing. But that's how they process it. You do hear that from people, especially in the context of Trump. Again, in the context of Walker here, we're in the first 24 hours, so I would urge patience to figuring out what the ramifications are. There are some people, though, Jim, to your point, who are just in this polarized world. I'm voting for the R on the ballot regardless because the D's are evil, or I'm voting for the D on the ballot regardless because the R's are evil, or I need them in Washington. To your point, one more point here, a lot of Christian conservatives who say, I know Trump's not an altar boy. I actually know that he's much worse than not an altar boy. But I got what I wanted on the Supreme Court, so I was willing to do it.
Right.
But what just drives me insane, though? You can't be the morality party worrying about selling cakes to gay couples, or worrying about women having abortions, or protesting about using birth control, even though almost everyone in America uses birth control. You can't, I don't think, have any credibility when you are over and over again looking the other way on those issues when you come to vote. It just doesn't seem to, what does it say about your so-called emphasis on your Christian values? You know what I mean?
You get the Democrats right now being very careful about this in Georgia, by the way. Senator Warnock himself said, I will leave it to others to talk about the specifics of this reporting. I just want to reinforce to the voters in Georgia that I don't think the government has any role. That's a decision between a woman and her doctor and maybe her, priest or minister or rabbi, but not the government. That's Senator Warnock's position there. It'll be interesting to see if that changes. Right? Yeah. Watch that. Or watch if other Senator Warnock himself maybe wants to stay away from it. Do other Democratic groups come in with their own money and try to make something of it? I do think you raise a critical point about, a lot of people like authenticity in their politicians, even if some of that authenticity is flaws, is stuff that in the old days would make you say, no way, this person cannot succeed. We've certainly seen Trump do that. You mentioned Senator Blumenthal overcame, he lied. He lied about his record. And he was able to, win another election, and then you hope you put it behind you. In this case, this issue is so personal, and it is an issue of such principle. I've said this before, we need to respect people, whatever your views on abortion. If somebody says, my faith, I can't do it, okay, at least they were honest and transparent. That's their position, right? We want politicians to be open and honest about their positions, whether they agree or disagree. Not my job to agree or disagree, but to the voters out there to agree or disagree. Here, because his position is so hardline, the hypocrisy, and again, if he said this was 13, 14 years ago, that's why I am now, it was a big mistake, but that's not what he's saying. He's saying this is a lie. You can explain your past if it's inconsistent with your present. Everybody raise your hand if you've never changed your mind, right? All the perfect people raise your hand, but that's not what he's doing. He's saying it's a lie. He's not saying I learned from when I was a younger man and this is how I got to where I am now. That would be a different conversation, and we would be having a different conversation if that's what were happening. He says this is a lie. The Daily Beast says we have the receipts and the documentation, and now we're going to go through this. And again, it's breaking 5 weeks from Election Day.
Can I paraphrase, since you mentioned authenticity, the great George Burns, who once said, authenticity is everything. Once you learn to fake that, you've got it made. We're talking to John King from CNN.
So John King, obviously we're still recovering. Well, we're not, but millions of people are still recovering from this tragedy of Hurricane Ian down in Florida. And talk about what seems to me to be hypocrisy. The Senator Rubio and Senator Scott, this is their state, and I think one of them didn't vote on it, and the other one voted against the money. I may have them backwards, but they didn't support money for their own state. I don't get it.
They have in the past, I think you're talking about the broader government funding bill that has other stuff in it, which is the argument there. And they have in the past voted against, for example, some of the money for Superstorm Sandy. I saw Senator Rubio on the weekend talking about that, and he said there were other things in it that he couldn't support, that he supports, focused hurricane relief. And he said he would vote against any aid to Florida in the future if he saw that it contained pork in there. We'll watch as this one plays out. I do think you do get this is when you are reminded that all politics is local, that when it's their state, everybody says we need help. I think we talked a little bit last week. We have seen this, Biden and DeSantis have figured it out. They've actually talked several times. We'll see what happens tomorrow when Biden goes to Florida. But this should be a moment where politics get shoved aside and you say, what do our friends and neighbors, who cares what party they are? Who cares what color they are? Who cares how wealthy they are or not? What do our friends and neighbors need right now? But because of past votes, you will have that come up as well. Are you being hypocritical? You said no to New Jersey and New York. Why do you want so much money for Florida?
Speaking of Florida, has anybody other than Rick Scott, who I think said, I don't condone violence, which is not exactly a condemnation of Trump using the words death wish when he's talking about Mitch McConnell in a Truth Social posting about his vote to keep government operating. I think the stopgap funding thing. Has any Republican senator criticized Trump for both the death wish comment and the racism directed at Elaine Chao, his former cabinet member who happens to be Mitch McConnell's wife?
If any of them have had the decency to come forward in the last several hours, I haven't seen it. We talked about this at length on the program yesterday, and the answer was no. Senator Scott said, racism is never okay. All right, great. That should not be a courageous statement. And I'm not trying to pick on him. This puts them all in a hard position. And Jim, we've had this conversation before. What is more important to you, principle or power? And Republicans are afraid to at least say, what would be the harm in saying, after January 6th, knowing the volatility out there in America, knowing the propensity, the willingness of some people to take it from rhetoric to violence. Again, I give you January 6th. I give you the Oath Keepers trial that is happening right now in Washington, D.C. All of us should be careful about our rhetoric. So we should not say death wish. If you want to criticize Mitch McConnell for negotiating with Biden, go for it. Fine, fair game. And then to smear, I'm not going to repeat it, to have a clear racist smear about Elaine Chao, who served in the cabinet of two different Republican presidents, including Donald Trump. She's been around Washington a long time. It's just blatant racism. So why can't you at least say what the president did was wrong? It was reprehensible. He should immediately apologize. But nobody will even do that. Why? Because they're afraid of getting into a fight with him in the 5 weeks between now and Election Day, and they're afraid of alienating a small sliver of his base, which thinks this is funny somehow, which doesn't like Mitch McConnell and likes when Donald Trump beats up Mitch McConnell, even if he uses words like death threat, who, for whatever reason, will look past blatant, open racism by the former president of the United States, who is still the most powerful person in the Republican Party. This would be a very different conversation if Donald Trump were in retirement and not coming back. Donald Trump plans on coming back. He's the leader of their party, but they want power. Maybe if they get power and they get the House and the Senate, some of them will suddenly have the courage to say racism is bad, violent rhetoric or potentially violent rhetoric is bad, but they're not right now, Jim, because they want to win in 5 weeks. That's more important to them.
By the way, speaking of 5 weeks, Val Demings, I was rooting for her to be vice president. I thought she would have been great, former police chief in Rhode Island, congresswoman, very impressive in that role. How's she doing against Marco Rubio? Is there any chance she might win?
I say this, especially when you get inside 5 weeks. I say the voters are about to speak, so let's not try to be smarter than the voters, right? Let's respect the voters in every state. I haven't seen any polling lately. By all accounts, Rubio is ahead. I think some of these races are a little closer than the Republicans thought they might be. I think now you have a giant question, whether you're a Democrat or a Republican or an independent, whether we're talking about Rubio, whether we're talking about the governor's race, whether we're talking about local races across Florida, especially in Southwest Florida. Does the hurricane, does Ian interfere with participation in the voting? So I don't see any reason to say
That's a great question. The polls may have been wiped out in some of the places.
I was looking today that half of the schools in Southwest Florida, they believe that half of the schools might not be able to be repaired.
Yeah.
In the hardest hit areas. I'm not saying the whole state, but in the hardest hit areas, Lee County, places like that. And so a lot of elections, schools are your polling places. So the state of Florida has a gargantuan task on its hand for an election that's in 5 weeks. Takes us off subject a little bit, but I have seen nothing I have seen Rubio spending a lot of money, and Rubio, again, Marco Rubio would be one of those people you might think would step forward because of his role on the Intelligence Committee, his former role as sort of a Cheney-ish, hawkish conservative on national security issues when it comes to either the documents at Mar-a-Lago or blatant racism from the former president of the United States. Marco Rubio, you would think, might be someone we would be hearing more from. That we are not tells you, Marjorie, back to that race, that he's being extra careful. He's not going to offend anybody there whose vote he thinks he needs.
John King, good to see you as always. Thank you for your time.
Go Celtics, go Bruins.
I knew it. It's over for those other guys. Yeah.
I know, the poor Red Sox. It's been a tough season.
Patriots aren't exactly burning
Patriots,
it up
that's
either.
right. The Patriots aren't burning up either. Okay. Thank you very much, John King.
See you, John.
Very much appreciate it. That's John King. We speak to him every week. He, of course, is from CNN. He is the chief national correspondent for CNN, and we thank him very much for his time. Coming up, we're going to open the lines and talk to you about not just Herschel Walker, but the latest on Dr. Mehmet Oz and Marjorie Taylor Greene. People that, not so much Oz, but certainly Greene and certainly Walker, they're part of that morality police crowd, and yet they're kind of not walking the walk, as it were. That's next. You can call us or text us at 877-301-8970, 877-301-8970.
It's a new term for the Supreme Court, which opened a new session with a brand new justice and 9 new cases on the docket. We'll take you through what's happening in the court and what the justices may be thinking months after the fall of Roe v. Wade. NYU professor Melissa Murray joins us on all things SCOTUS. That's next time on The Takeaway from WNYC and PRX.
This afternoon at 2, here on GBH News 89.7.
Support for GBH comes from you and the Office of the Massachusetts State Treasurer. The Unclaimed Property Division is holding unclaimed funds for the citizens and businesses of the Commonwealth. You can see if you have unclaimed money at findmassmoney.com. And Guideline. Automated 401k plans from Guideline can help Massachusetts employers provide customized retirement plans for small businesses. Learn more at guideline.com/radio.
Welcome back to Boston Public Radio. Jim Browning and Marjorie. We want to spend the last few minutes talking about hypocrisy and lies, two of our favorite subjects. The report Marjorie mentioned is BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed is the Herschel Walker thing?
Yes.
Right. The Republican nominee for the Senate in Georgia running against Reverend Warnock. As you know, Herschel Walker's an avowed abortion opponent, paid for his girlfriend. The evidence seems overwhelming to have an abortion back in 2009, even though he says it's untrue. We want to know, and yet the list is endless. Marjorie mentioned Marjorie Taylor Greene, who is big-time family values, and she had sex with this tantric sex guru at the gym, which is fine. The sex part is fine, but she was married to this guy, another guy, not the tantric sex guru. You go back 10 years, you have Richard Blumenthal, we mentioned a minute ago, a Democrat in Connecticut, talked passionately and emotionally about his time in Vietnam. Of course, he never went to Vietnam. All these people were elected. And so our question for the final few minutes here at 877-301-8970, have we become accepting of hypocrisy and lies in politicians? Trump's a really good example, by the way, as long as they're pure, meaning that they agree with us on sort of our core political values, and let the honesty and whatever that is, honesty, be damned. 877-301-8970. You know, I have to say, when John was talking, I'm thinking about this till a minute ago, he said, you know, in a close race, every little bit makes a difference and it's virtually a dead heat. You know, I forgot until we took a break. He also lied, Herschel Walker, about where he graduated in his class. He also lied repeatedly about his business success. I mean, he's been lying through this whole campaign, and it appears that it hasn't hurt him at all.
Well, he's twice married with 4 known children, all from different mothers. The Daily Beast revealed in July that Walker had lied to his own campaign staff when he denied the existence of 2 of those children, who he kept from public view for years, despite speaking out against fatherlessness in the black community. So as John King said, you know, if he had said, you know, I made some mistakes when I was a young man. I had children out of wedlock. I paid my girlfriend to have an abortion. I've changed. I'm different now. But he's not saying that.
Well, you know why?
He's saying she's lying.
Well, he has a role model. We all heard what candidate Trump said getting off the bus on Access Hollywood. Was it Access Hollywood?
Mm-hmm.
Grab him by the you-know-what.
Yep.
How much did that hurt him?
Didn't hurt him at all.
He went on to become president of the United States, as far as I can see. And so the question, again, we don't have much time here, so if you're going to participate in this, please do it soon. What is up with us that we see that it isn't even the integrity anymore, the honesty, the decency of the candidate at all, as long as he or she parrots our position on the issues, which is really troubling, I should say.
But I always say, what are the positions on the issues? Build the wall? Is that the issue? Give tax breaks to wealthy
I paid for,
millionaires?
I'm going to tell the truth here. I sent a $700 check to my girlfriend to get an abortion, but today I'm going to vote against anything that frees up a woman's right to have an abortion. That's the position I want you to have. We don't care that you're a liar and a hypocrite. I'm with you. I mean, that's the answer as to what the positions are.
I guess, but as I said before, you know, when you're around telling everybody about their morality and you're lying every time you open your mouth practically, it seems to be a little bit...
Who's that hurt recently as far as... Which political candidate in the last few years has deceit... I mean, there wasn't so long ago... Didn't the guy who was in the bathroom in Minnesota or whatever?
Yes, he was a big anti-gay rights crusader.
I think he lost his seat, if I'm not wrong.
He was found in the bathroom with some young men in the bathroom.
Okay, well, you know, again, whatever. But who was the last candidate in the last couple of years who was caught red-handed, who was rejected by the voters because of their being a hypocrite and a liar? I can't. You know, I'm sure there's one, but I can't.
Think of anybody. If anybody can think of one, please let us know. But what do you think about this? It's not probably a good sign. And from Shrewsbury.
Hello, Ann.
Thank you for calling.
Hey, how are you?
Good,
a couple things come to mind. You know, my husband and I are watching The Handmaid's Tale. And,
love it.
It's a little frightening because I thought it was fiction. I didn't realize it was a GOP documentary. But, you know, the thing is that, you know, both sides have had their issues, right?
Yep.
But, I mean, look at what happened to Al Franken.
Yep.
And now we have all, it seems like it's all Republicans that are just getting away with really, really crappy things. Like, not just silliness or girlfriends, but like, you know, when Trump said the whole thing about grabbing him, well, my daughter's a rape survivor, and she was appalled that the country would still stand behind him.
Yeah, and you know, Ann, it wasn't just the grabbing them by the whatevers. It was, I think we're up to 24 women now who have accused the former president
of some kind of
sexual assault. 24 women, and how people can say, oh, they're all lying. They're all lying. The only person that's telling the truth is Donald Trump. It reminds me of what people used to say, and some people still do say, about the priests in the Catholic Church. Oh, they're all lying to get money from the church, as if these women's careers or money-making prospects has been helped.
But yeah, can I tell you, again, I would say I'm not sure that's the right question. I think whether they think they're lying or not lying, even if they're convinced they're lying, they're willing to forgive it. And that's where it's troubling. If you really believe in your heart they're all lying, even though it defies credibility, that's one thing. I think they believe most of the charges against these politicians and choose to vote for them anyway. By the way, our colleagues, I think it was Aiden, came up with one example. Doug Jones, a Democrat, won that Senate race in Alabama a couple of years ago. Of course, he lost in his re-election bid over Roy Moore, the former Chief Justice, I think, of the Supreme Court down there, because Roy Moore was hitting on teenagers at the mall, wasn't he? As far as that may have been a bridge too far in Alabama. That is correct.
Yeah, they thought that was too far. So there's a good one. People did care about that in Alabama. But thank you for the call. It was a great call. The Handmaid's Tale is pretty frightening, and that's why you see a lot of women dressed up in the Handmaid's Tale's outfits protesting at a lot of these abortion rallies. Judy from Pennsylvania. Hi, Judy.
Hey, Judy.
Oh, hi.
Hi.
I'm a recent. Are you hearing an echo? Do I need to turn?
Nope,
it's fine.
Okay, perfect. Thanks. I'm so sorry.
That's okay.
I'm a recent transplant from Massachusetts to Pennsylvania, and so I've listened to you. I was actually just listening to you here in Pennsylvania.
Great.
I was wondering if you could comment on the role of John Fetterman and Mehmet Oz in commenting on the violence in the city of Philadelphia, because just in the last couple days, a judge, consistent with Pennsylvania law, did not allow the local thing that the mayor of Philadelphia had put in place to prevent guns coming into places where children congregate. So he attempted to try to keep the children of Philadelphia safer by not allowing guns into recreational facilities and parks and stuff like that. But it was just in the last couple of days overturned by a judge.
And what did Fetterman and Oz say? We missed it. What did Fetterman and Oz say?
I don't know about this.
Neither one have spoken out about it. Neither one are speaking about the violence against a lot of its youth violence in the city of Philadelphia.
Well, I have to say, I don't question your retelling. I don't know about it, but I find it shocking that at least Fetterman is not. And by the way, that's not very dissimilar from the Heller case out of D.C., where they had comparable laws, which was the first time the Supreme Court of the United States ever ruled on whether or not the right to bear arms applied to individuals. They said it did, even though it says militia in the Constitution. And the same thing with the New York law that is very similar to the one we have in Massachusetts that was struck down by the Supreme Court last year. So that doesn't explain Fetterman's silence, but we'll check it out. Our colleagues will. And we'll get back to you in a second, so don't go away, Judy. Thanks for the call.
We do know that there's been reports about Mem and Oz and cruelty to animals, the puppy killing. I don't know if they were actually puppy, but he was in violation of the Animal Welfare Act when he was doing, his team was conducting experiments on, at least according to Jezebel, more than 1,000 live animal subjects, including dogs, pigs, calves, and rabbits, and there was suffering involved with those animals, so I don't know.
Well, he's also a snake oil salesman on television.
He's a snake oil salesman. Yeah. He is a snake oil salesman. Anyway, 877-301-8970. Judy, thank you very much for the call. Gary Hart may have been the last politician to immediately flunk out of a race because of hypocrisy. That was Martha and Acton.
Was he front? Was he?
He was. I think he might have been leading. He was the one who stupidly. There were a lot of rumors about Gary Hart cheating on his wife, and he stupidly said to a reporter, "Well, follow me."
And they did.
And the reporter
followed. Was it the Miami Herald that did that?
It was the Miami Herald, and I cannot believe that he would pose with this woman on his lap as he did on a boat called The Monkey Business.
Oh, it was Monkey Business.
And she was sitting on his lap and smiling, and that was the end of his campaign.
Well, it hasn't happened many times, as evidenced by.
It has not happened many times.
We're checking, one of our colleagues, Judy, is checking into the Philadelphia thing. We'll get back to you in a minute. Astrid in a car.
Yeah, he was the front runner for the 88 nomination.
Yeah,
Thank you. Our
was.
staff checked it out. Yep.
Astrid in a car. Hi.
Hey, so we're forgetting about Anthony Weiner.
Anthony Weiner.
Good one.
Oh, my God.
Good one.
Yeah. We're forgetting about, Governor Cuomo. So, although, he wasn't in an election, but
another good one.
Those are encouraging examples, actually.
There's a very good piece in the New York Times today about the Me Too movement 5 years later, talking about whether or not it succeeded. And I only got through half of it this morning because I had to come to work here. But what I saw so far was rather encouraging that things have changed. So I found that very, very heartening. If people haven't seen it, it's worth looking up. But Governor Cuomo is a great example. He was accused by multiple women of kissing, unwanted kisses and unwanted grabbings and saying sexual things. And of course, Anthony Weiner was sending pictures of himself, I think in his underpants, or maybe no underpants, I'm not sure.
With his kid, with his baby lying
that
next
was
to him.
The last straw
and by the
for
way,
his wife.
One of the greatest, Astrid, thanks for remembering those, one of the great political documentaries ever. I don't know if it's called Weiner. I think we had the directors on at one point. This is about the rise and fall of Anthony Weiner, and it's about how after his first offenses, he was attempting a comeback, and he was actually leading in the race to be New York City's mayor until the second set of accusations came out. And as Astrid said, that sunk him as well. It should have. But he went to jail, did he not, for a short period of time?
I think he did. Yeah, he was an incredibly talented politician.
He was.
Buddy Cianci, Scott from Worcester, said didn't he get reelected after he was out of prison?
I believe. Or maybe while he was in prison.
Curley here in Boston.
Yeah.
Of course, he did a lot of things. Every time you go over to South Boston, you see that big, huge bathhouse, the Michael Curley bathhouse. I mean, he did a lot for his constituents, and they paid him back.
By the way, don't be deceived, though. While you guys have done a wonderful job of identifying when there was payback for your unattractive behavior, your hypocrisy. So far, we've come up with like 5 examples. 5 examples in the last 10 or 15 years is not very impressive.
John Edwards was running for president.
Oh, that's a good one, too.
Yeah, he had a child out of wedlock with a girlfriend while his wife was suffering from cancer. That did not go over well. He dropped out of the race.
What I would have said were that Astrid not come up with a Cuomo example. I would have said most of those examples are years ago. Would it be tolerated now? And I guess the answer to my question is, in some cases, why was it not tolerated in the case of Cuomo, and it is tolerated in the case of so many of these other politicians?
I think some of these people have resigned. They've just
he resigned because he couldn't continue, not because he was a person of principle. He's continuing to say that Letitia James trumped up the charges against him. He did it for the good of the party, the good of the state, the good of the whatever.
But I think there's some expectation. I would think at this juncture that Herschel Walker would drop out.
By whom?
That he just do it because he's so disgraced himself and so disgraced his family and so has his son talking about what a horrible person he is.
But
what a horrible father.
supporters of Cuomo in huge volumes turned on Cuomo.
Mm-hmm.
Which supporters of Herschel Walker have turned on Herschel Walker? Why is that different, I guess, is what
Well,
I'm
I guess what I'm saying is some of these people, and I could be wrong about this, but they took it on themselves to resign, whether they were going to win or lose. Gary Hart resigned.
No, he did not. He resigned because he couldn't win anymore. Cuomo resigned because he knew he couldn't be governor anymore.
I don't know if that's necessarily true. I don't know if that Gary Hart may have won the nomination. I'm not sure.
You think Governor Cuomo left because he thought it was the right thing to do, as opposed to the fact that he's about to be impeached by the Democratic Senate in his own state? I would say that's what caused this guy to take a walk.
Well, that could be true. That could be true. I don't know. I just think that there's sort of a lack. I mean, people talk about President Trump saying he has no shame, and I think a lot of people that do these kinds of things have no shame. Some people just have no shame.
Speaking of political documentaries, since we're making recommendations today, Jamie just looked up. The documentary is called Wiener. We had
really
the directors
good.
on 2016. On the other end of the spectrum, one of the great political documentaries, also from New York City, relating to a congressperson, is about 3 women running for office in the same year that Ocasio-Cortez won, and she's one of the women who's focused on. Can you check out what the name of that is? That is also two of the best political documentaries. One a horrible story, one a beautiful one. Chris in Rhode Island, you have 45 seconds, Chris. Take it away.
All I have to say, Jim and Marjorie, is, very deep conversation for 45 seconds, but people are doing whatever they want to do for shock value because it's acceptable because Trump hasn't been removed from the political spotlight.
Very good point.
So what they'll say is, I can say and do whatever I want. Trump's still around. Trump doesn't care about them. They don't care about Trump, but they just want to advance their careers, and that's what's happening. It's a terrible political climate. We're all living it. It's awful.
You are totally right from the top. It trickles down. Thank you, Chris, for your thoughts. We really appreciate it.
But here's Ted from Marshfield. Between the Catholic Church and the Republican and moral majority, I've given up on all conservatives in this country. Thank God for dogs. There you go.
That's a pretty good one, actually.
Okay.
We're out of time.
We are out of time, but thank you very much for tuning in to another edition of Boston Public Radio. Tomorrow, we're going to be joined. Who we got tomorrow? Oops, I'm on the wrong page.
I just threw out my script.
I'm on the wrong page. Oops. I'm still on the wrong page.
Well, we have a lot of
now
fabulous people with us tomorrow.
Yes, we do.
By the way, the AOC documentary is called Knock Down the House, 2019. It's available on Netflix. Sorry.
Okay, I'm now on the right page.
I doubt that.
Evan Horwitz from the Tufts Center for State Policy Analysis on what the 4 Massachusetts ballot questions mean. This is a really good discussion because I think a lot of us don't understand them. Plus, Boston Globe TV critic Matt Gilbert, NYU medical ethicist Art Kaplan, NBC Sports Trenny Casey, and our animal expert, Cy Montgomery. We love to listen to her. She's so soothing. Our crew is Zoe Matthews, Aidan Conley, Mackenzie Farkas. Additional support by Brendan Dede and Gia Orsino. Our engineer is John the Claw Parker. Our executive producer is Jamie Bologna. And special thanks to our BPL engineering team, Steve Baracci and Rob Fagnet. What's on TV, Jim Browdy?
Well, 2 things. It's our ballot question week where we're having a debate on all the ballot questions, in addition to the work that Evan Horowitz is doing. Last night was question 1. Tonight is question 2. What is question 2, everybody says? Well, it's a ballot question that would set a limit saying that 83% of every premium dollar you spend on dental insurance must be spent on patient care. Both sides, they'll debate tonight. And the Steiners, the people who were terrorized by eBay and eBay's thugs, they and their lawyer, Rosemary Scapiccio, one of the best lawyers on the planet, will be with me tonight in studio. That's tonight at 7 o'clock.
That sounds like an excellent show,
I think
Jim.
it will be.
Thank you again for listening to another edition of Boston
Thank you all
Public
for
Radio.
coming,
Thanks
too.
for
We
people who
appreciate
came
it.
down to the library. I'm Marjorie Egan.
I'm Jim Browdy.
Thanks again, and we hope you can tune in tomorrow. Meanwhile, I hope you have a great day.
October 6th to 16th. Tickets at bostonballet.org.
Go be